Ялиниченьку у зеленому саду, чи не вийде дівчинонька рано вранці по ладу? Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1058 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news that Russia's urgently mobilizing its military reserves for training, and we have other big news as well. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to get significant news today that the United States of America, under the incoming president-elect, is going to be conducting unmitigated economic warfare against the Russian Federation in an attempt to drive the Russian Federation's economy and military apparatus to its knees. At the exact same time as that news was coming out inside the United States in congressional hearings today, we were able to hear that the Russian central government has given a decree to the Russian Army's reservists, otherwise called the Rosguardia, calling forward a large number of them to be mobilized for regular army training here within the very near future, possibly showing that the Russian Federation is already foreseeing that peace talks will fail and the war will continue, requiring a call for more manpower to continue to fight inside of Ukraine. Meanwhile, we've been able to get major follow-up news from inside of the city of Tambov, as one of the biggest gunpowder factories inside of the area of the Western Russian Federation in the small suburb of Kotovsk was hit last night, causing serious damage to Russian gunpowder and explosives manufacturing, and once again showing us that the Russian Federation will most likely be dealing with a very tough military situation as well as a serious economical situation due to the heavy Ukrainian attacks on oil infrastructure over the prior days. We have also been able to hear of some major news from the United Kingdom and France, advance, as it appears that they are seriously considering the deployment of French and British forces onto the territory of Ukraine in a peacekeeping measure, most likely bringing NATO into a direct armed involvement with the Russian Federation if this was to go through. And while seriously being considered, there has been major roadblocks in the past to such propositions that have made sure that that did not go through. We have also been able to hear on the other side of the world, inside of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has denounced the United States of America for conducting military flights near to their borders very recently, possibly further... Well, yeah, real womp womp for the North Koreans there. Possibly, the U.S. military is responding to the multiple amount of missiles launches that have been conducted in recent times, as well as the military buildup of DPRK forces from the KPA along the Korean DMZ. We have also been able to hear, meanwhile, inside of Ukraine, that heavy fighting has ensued in most frontline areas, with the Russian Federation taking incredibly high losses, and according to the chief of the armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, making absolutely no ground whatsoever over not only today, but the past few months. The news is absolutely massive today, and I do want to say that the United States of America appears to be putting a far more aggressive foot forward than they have in the past, and that is actually going to be bringing us into the major piece of news from today, the catalyst for what may become the end of the Ukraine war here within the very near future, or the escalation of the Ukraine war into something far larger. We have been able to hear that inside the city of Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America, and a city so storied with political and foreign policy decisions of the past that everybody in the world largely knows what the city of Washington, D.C. is. But specifically within the U.S. Capitol today, during some congressional hearings to approve new cabinet members and also heads of specific executive offices, there has been some very interesting statements made today by those people who will most likely be authorized by the Congress to carry forward with executive duties within different executive agencies and departments for the U.S. government well into the next 4 years. And we have been able to hear that across the board, the resounding answer has been by multiple of the picks, the Treasury picks, and many others, that there will be some sort of a larger amount of damage caused to the Russian Federation through more serious oil sanctions attempting to drive the Russian Federation to their knees. We have been able to hear that they believe that the current sanctions on the Russian Federation are insufficient, and according to the incoming Treasury Secretary, they have said that they support tougher sanctions on Russian oil companies to force Russia to the negotiating table, largely through an ultimatum of either suffer economic collapse or accept large concessions to the West at the end of the Ukraine war. This is a fairly significant move by the United States of America's government, and it is once again showing us that the United States of America appears to be ramping up already to prepare to make a more aggressive action towards the Russian Federation moving on into the future to ensure that the Russian Federation will be driven to its knees economically and militarily and be forced to the negotiating table or forced into a complete collapse of the Russian Federation from the inside out. It is a major ordeal to see what's going on right here, and it does appear that this is already in the motion, that the United States is not only going to be conducting the economic warfare that we've seen so far, which has had some limits to it in some instances, and we have been able to see that some Russian companies, as industrious as they've tried to be, have tried to keep themselves alive by circumventing sanctions, but that appears that it will no longer be the case, as the United States will most likely not only be ramping up economic sanctions against the Russian Federation, but most likely will also be accompanying that through increased military support to the state of Ukraine as well. A peace through strength initiative to drive the Russian Federation to its knees militarily and economically, and to force it to the negotiating table. However,
and also there must be some coordination behind the scenes too, because Ukraine has ramped up their attacks on oil refineries and also oil depots inside of Russia over the past couple of weeks. In fact, it's shot up tremendously. Like, it went from literally having very few attacks to literally an attack every single day for the last couple of days on Russian oil. So there must be some level of coordination in the background that will accompany these sanctions, which are coming up in just a few days. And it sounds like it's a good concerted effort. So hopefully it works.
It certainly does appear that that is the case, Matthew. We have been able to hear in the past that the president-elect of the United States and the current sitting president, soon their positions will change here in about 4 days, I believe on January 20th, when the inauguration of the new president of the United States will occur. But up until this point, the president and the president-elect have actually had, according to public statements, a high deal of communications with each other and have been discussing a great deal on foreign policy and particularly on the U.S. stances towards the People's Republic of China, the U.S. stance in the Middle East against Iranian proxy forces and the Islamic Republic of Iran directly, and also the war in Ukraine and the U.S. stance that should be taken against the Russian Federation. It appears that recently we have been seeing very clearly at this point that the incoming administration, or the president-elect, is starting to lean more into what the current president was doing in a far more aggressive and larger scale, moving towards a complete sanctioning of the Russian Federation, economic warfare in an unmitigated form, and also possibly supplying a large amount or larger amount of arms and munitions to the state of Ukraine than has already been done by the current administration. This is most likely an attempt to be able to force the Russian Federation into a position where they will no longer be able to wage war, at least as far as their coffers are able to afford, or the military is able to afford in terms of casualties, to force them to the negotiating table and to find some way to actually win the war. That appears to largely be what we're seeing at this moment, and we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation is already starting to give some pushback to this, possibly as a major national decree came out today from the office of the president of the Russian Federation, specifically Vladimir Putin. We were able to see this decree from the office of the president of the Russian Federation, and we do know that that's exactly what it is, because this says ukaz, which means decree, and then this says Prezidenta Russkoy Federacji, which means the president of the Russian Federation. Now, beyond that, I'm not that good at reading Russian, so we are going to be switching over to the English translated version of this decree of the president of the Russian Federation to be able to read exactly to y'all what this decree is saying, as it already appears that the Russian Federation is taking preemptive steps to ensure that they will be able to prolong the war beyond the first round of peace negotiations, although the economy is already significantly reeling in the Russian Federation from the massive hemorrhaging of oil that's happening every single day, and for that matter, the collapse of other major economic institutions, such as the real estate developers just about a month ago. But nevertheless, here is the decree word for word. The decree of the President of the Russian Federation on the conscription of citizens of the Russian Federation in the reserve for military training in 2025. In accordance with the federal laws of May 31st, 1996, number 61 FZ on defense, and March 28th, 1998, number 53 FZ on military duty and military service, I decree to call up in 2025 citizens of the Russian Federation who are in reserve to undergo military training in the armed forces of the Russian Federation, the troops of the National Guard, also called the Rosguardia, of the Russian Federation, the rescue military formations of the Ministry of the Russian Federation for Civil Defense, emergencies and elimination of consequences of natural disasters, state security agencies, and the Federal Security Service agencies, meaning the FSB, for official use only, that's actually a little header right down there. But beyond that, moving on from that, the government of the Russian Federation and the executive authorities of the constituent entities of the Russian Federation shall ensure the implementation of measures related to the conscription of citizens of the Russian Federation in the reserves for military training and the conduct of these training sessions. It appears that the
Very interesting. I wonder who this is for, though, because obviously they're calling up the reserves here, but are they trying to send these guys to the front lines in Ukraine after they complete their renewed training, or is this to potentially get ready for some type of action against NATO or potentially defending Russia against something? I'm not really sure exactly what this is aimed at.
That is the question, and I like how you worded that, Banthy, because we actually were talking about that very thing right before the stream, so I actually knew that that one was coming. We do not know what this general mobilization is of the reservists at this point and what this is moving towards, but we do have some hypothetical scenarios that the Russian Federation is considering that would be, well, largely find it prudent to start mobilizing these reservists for military service, active military service, at least at this point. Right now in Ukraine, there is, of course, a major war going on. And from what we understand, while there is a decent amount of mobics, or well, it largely is mobics for sure. I'm not even going to try and attempt the actual proper full-length Russian pronunciation of that. But there is a decent amount of mobics, which are conscripted forces of the Russian Federation that are currently fighting in Ukraine. But for the large part, we do believe that the larger amount of Russian forces that are in Ukraine are still kontraktniki, which is the Russian word for contract soldiers. You can can see that they really just took the English word and tried to Russify it a little bit. But beyond that, that is largely what we understand the situation to be in Ukraine. However, if the Russian Federation wants to keep the war going, and they continue to see diminishing amounts of funds to be able to recruit contract troops with the supposedly lucrative contracts that they're continuing to offer to the Russian public, they will have to start relying a lot more on the cheaper form of manpower that the Russian military has available, which are the poorly trained and poorly equipped conscript forces that make up a large amount of the Rosguardia and also some other larger elements of the Russian regular army at large. It appears that by ordering the training of these forces towards regular army standards, they are preparing for the possible implementation of conscript manpower in Ukraine, and while that may be a lot more costly in terms of casualties on a 24-hour cycle, they still will be able to prolong the war and keep it going until they may see that Western support for Ukraine will fall. Although there is still a ticking time bomb larger than that in the background. The Russian economy is dying. Everyone can see that at this point. It is not a hidden thing. Not even the propagandists are really denying that on the Russian side at this point. The Russian economy is starting to go into a backslide and eventually a complete collapse. And the Russian Federation understands that they may not be able to prolong the war, even by military means, as long as the economy will last. So for this reason, the MOBICs may be turned into regular army soldiers here very soon to possibly begin a conventional war with NATO, one that may be able to force the West into making some larger concessions to the Russian Federation, lest they could suffer the consequence of nuclear Armageddon, with the Russian Federation largely losing a conventional war and firing off their nuclear weapons at the West, and the West doing so in return towards the Russian Federation, largely wiping out 2/3 of the population of the Northern Hemisphere within the first year of that nuclear exchange. But nevertheless, it does seem as though many people are currently talking about the U.S. model, or largely the U.S. Plan to conduct unmitigated or really unregulated economic warfare against the Russian Federation here in the near future, and the possible Russian response to that, which we're already starting to see, as the next U.S. administration is planning to increase those sanctions on Russian oil to force a Russian economic failure, or at least start to move them towards such an economic failure that it forces them to the negotiating table and forces them to make serious concessions to the United States and the state of Ukraine in this current conflict. And a lot of people are putting in their thoughts. And a lot of people are saying that this is a great strategy and it most likely will work the best. Others are saying it's as good as any other plan. That's actually a smaller amount. And some people, a very small amount, are saying that it is a bad strategy and we had better options. But nevertheless, a lot of people are weighing in at the moment on what they are believing should be the move, or whether this is the move or not. And it appears that the large majority of people are believing that this is the way forward, and this is the way that the United States can finally see victory on the fields of Ukraine over the Russian Federation. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 64% of the audience, the majority, said it's a great strategy and it'll probably work the best, while 23% said it's as good as any other plan, and 5% said that's a bad strategy and we had other options. And for the people that chose that 5% option right there, I would say the only other strategy that we really had to take was to hope that we could arm Ukraine to the teeth and hope that they have a total victory on the battlefield. And to be honest, I think that situation is kind of unlikely at the moment. We discussed that at length last night. I think a total victory is probably waning away as it goes by, because once again, Russia has a lot of population they can call on to throw into the military, train them, and put them right into the meat grinder. And even though they're untrained and they're really not fit for service, that is still another person that Ukraine has to get through in order to take back their territory, which creates a big obstacle. So I would say that was not a good idea to go the total victory route, because that's pretty much futile at this point. I would say, like we said last night, striking behind the lines and striking these oil refineries and these oil depots is the way to do it, because that will bring Russia to its knees economically, and that is the most surefire way to make sure we can bring Putin down and also try to depose him out of power. So I would say I'm with the 64%. That is the best strategy at the moment possible, and it'll probably work the best. And once again, I'm saying that irrespective of your political opinions here. I don't care what admin put this into place. It could have been the last one or this one. That was the best strategy no matter who put it into place. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I do believe it is a great strategy and it will work quite well. It's actually largely moving down the course of action that Matthew was talking about last night on the stream, interesting enough. It's almost verbatim, but there is a small addendum that I would like to make to the plan that largely moves it down both of our avenues at the same time, because we were talking a lot more about our conversation that we had yesterday on air with all of y'all today, and Matthew and me came to the conclusion that we are trying to make it to the same end result. It's just largely different different ways. And there is a little caveat at the end where I'm more open to negotiations and Matthew isn't. But at the same time, to largely explain both of our plans in a nutshell, the way they came out, both of us are looking for the Russian Federation to largely lose the war in Ukraine and to accept a greater deal of Western terms that would benefit the West and make sure that the Russians are getting the short end of the stick at the end of this conflict. Matthew wanted to do that largely through severe economic sanctions that would drive the Russian economy to its knees and force them largely to overthrow the Russian government without the possibility of peace talks at any point or negotiations that would see the war end before a Russian government collapse. That plan largely relies on the Russian Federation not taking severe, dangerous, or drastic actions in the meantime that would jeopardize the plan and also put the West at considerable risk. My plan was largely the same, but actually did not work around economic sanctions. It worked on providing Ukraine with munitions and weaponry to strike the Russian Federation's economic centers and drive the Russian economy to its knees to where they can no longer continue to keep operating in the war. If they are not able to continue operating in the war, they can come to the negotiating table, and we will give small concessions to the Russian Federation to ensure that the Russian Federation does not get in such a dangerous state that nuclear warfare is highly likely or may actually be in the process of occurring. But at the same time, those terms would still be heavily within the West and Ukraine's favor at the end of that conflict. If the Russians are never, according to my plan, able to make it to the negotiating table, even if their economy is dying, we will simply let them die or take whatever drastic actions they believe they should take, and we would respond to those accordingly. The two plans are fairly similar, but a little bit different towards the end, as Matthew was looking for the overthrow of the Russian Federation's government led by Putin, and I'm open to them possibly having an off-ramp just in the case if it looks like economic war was inevitable. But going on,
and also, generally speaking, by the way, just to clarify my perspective a little bit more, is I was saying that we should once again sanction the Russians heavily and try to pit the people against the government inside of Russia, because ultimately my goal was to depose Putin. So basically, I'm not really focused on trying to get to the negotiating table the fastest. It's more about trying to depose Putin the fastest. If negotiations happen along the way, then the United States should be willing to listen to that, but that should not be our primary objective right now, because Putin's made it clear he's not going to honor any agreements that we come to, and also he's not even playing fair in negotiations even before they start. Literally right now to this hour, he's not playing fair. He's already saying that he's shooting down all the proposals that the incoming admin had, which were somewhat lopsided toward Russia a little bit. He's even shooting those down. So I say depose the guy, get him out of there, because it's like negotiating with a terrorist at this point. You're not going to get anywhere.
I largely would agree with that, but I do want to make this a little bit more clear on my plan as well before we move on into the rest of everything here, that I do believe the Russian Federation is largely a terrorist state at this point, especially with how they're operating and how they are wanting to conduct largely terroristic actions against global airlines to get back at the West. But at the same time, we do have to realize that these are terrorists unlike any other. These terrorists are nuclear armed. And so at the end of the day, if it looks as though that nuclear war would be inevitable if we allowed the Russian economy to collapse, my plan does allow for an off-ramp for the Russian Federation where the government would remain intact in Russia and they would get some minor concessions in Ukraine, but it would be heavily lopsided within the West's favor, just to avoid the death of hundreds of millions of people within the Northern Hemisphere. That largely is the difference in between Matthew's plan and mine, and it's actually fairly minute, because the Russian Federation never found the terms acceptable. Under my plan, Matthew and my plan would end up being pretty much identical. The Russian Federation's economy would collapse, and the government would most likely be overthrown in the process, or it would turn into a larger war because the Russians would have nothing to lose, at least on a governmental level, and that could devolve into a nuclear conflict. So largely at the end of the day, depending on what Putin's actions were under my plan could end up being identical to Matthew's in the end. So with this in mind, the interesting thing is that this strategy is good that is being presented in the U.S. government right now. I do believe that crippling sanctions, not just heavy sanctions like we see right now, but truly crippling sanctions that drive the Russian oil industries into complete chaos, disarray, and collapse is a very good step forward. However, I do believe that it should be modified to largely not only meet Matthew's plan, but my plan simultaneously. Why not just drive the Russian economy to its knees through sanctions when we could allow the Ukrainians to stop the Russians on the front lines entirely well into the future and force a stalemate on the front lines as well, which would be very costly for the Russian Federation, and also support and encourage Ukrainian strikes onto Russian economic centers inside of their country, not only forcing the economy to its knees through sanctions, but also bringing the economy to its knees in the Russian Federation through the crippling strikes that Ukraine would conduct on critical oil manufacturing infrastructure, as well as other kinds of critical industry that produces a large amount of income inside the Russian Federation. I believe a blend of the two plans would actually be the most potent and produce the most positive results, and that would either force the Russians to negotiate on our terms or force a Russian government collapse. Either one would be incredibly beneficial for Western interests.
I like blending the plans. Blending the plans is a good idea because I do like, and once again, I wasn't saying to stop arming Ukraine. Like, Ukraine obviously has to keep being armed. They have to keep fighting on the front lines and hold the Russians exactly where they are now, and hopefully even push them back even. But really, it's just necessary to hold the Russians where they are currently until the Russian economy collapses. Because once that happens, everything else will take care of itself pretty much from that point forward. Ukraine's military problem will be generally solved for a large part. And here's the best part about the plan. When you sanction the Russian economy to hell and back, especially targeting the oil industry, the only cost to the West, to the American people, is that we'll pay a slightly higher cost for oil and petroleum, and not much higher at all, actually, just slightly higher as a result of that. So it's not even really costly to us or Ukraine to pull that off, and it has the most effective result.
I would agree, and I believe that that probably will be a very beneficial thing to see for Western interests if we were to follow through with a blending of the plans, a combination of the two for the large part, in seeing the Russian Federation driven to its knees. I still believe that we should give them an off-ramp if it does appear that nuclear war is going to become inevitable at that point, but largely we will most likely see a collapse of the Russian government either during the war or even if they were given an off-ramp. I believe that the economic damage at this point is so severe, Russian governmental collapse because of the economy is most likely inevitable at this point and would be unavoidable even if the Russians did exit the war in Ukraine with even just a semblance of grace, not a actual exit of grace, just a semblance of one. I still believe the Russian economy is doomed to collapse at this point because of how bad off the Russian major oil companies are and their lack of reserve capital. Reserve capital would be crucial in rebuilding these major oil refineries that have been stricken and largely destroyed at this point, and without a ability to rebuild these major oil refineries or a lack of foreign investment, these Russian oil companies are already dead at this point. They're just in the process of dying. And once those companies finally do collapse in the Russian Federation, it is going to cause a major ripple effect, which will cause mass civil unrest and lead to the collapse of the Russian central government as we see it today. So either way, I do believe at this point it is inevitable. The Russian government of now will be gone in the future. But moving on from that and into the Russian Federation itself, we have also been able to see that the Ukrainians did conduct a major drone strike south of Tambov just the other day. And this was something that we didn't really have a lot of information on at the time, because it had just happened when we went live on air, but luckily some people were able to find us some information. In the suburbs of Tambov, specifically the town of Katovsk, there is... Holy moly!
Dang,
thank you, Sylvester the Cat. Jeez, that's huge. Thank you so much for that. And interestingly enough, speaking of an explosive super chat like that, there is actually an explosive manufactory down here. It is a gunpowder plant. And this appears to be it from what I could find here in this area. It looks almost like it's run down and completely abandoned, but oddly enough, this is one of the largest gunpowder manufactories in the Russian Federation that produces gunpowder for a wide variety of applications, but specifically for small arms ammunition, as well as some other forms of munitions that use grain powder propellant for the large part. I guess that's the best way I could explain it, because right now the actual specific terminology for that is evading me. But nevertheless, in the town of Katovsk, we were able to see that the gunpowder factory was in fact hit by Ukrainian drones and destroyed. And here's the clip. Bled. I guess you could say that the Russians are no longer going to have a powder room. But here's another clip of the drone attack.
Cub Cadet coming in strong. The two-stroke engine, it's going fire. Hellscaping again.
And that's the end of that clip right there. Hellscaping once more, as Matthew said. And this is the Russian gunpowder factory. Right where I showed it to y'all, right in this area. The whole thing largely got knocked out. It's very nice to see, very good to know, as a matter of fact. But you know something that is very interesting about that? The major gunpowder plants are largely underplayed. They're not really talked about too much out in the outside world, but there is some larger manufacturers inside the Russian Federation that produce small arms that are known around the world, especially within gun collector circles. For example, the major gun manufactory at Tula, also called the Tula Arsenal, which sits on the small island in the Upper River. And I guess, Matthew, when you go to work there, you get free uppers. Like uppers. Like, like, man, you go in there and you see all the workers twitching and shaking as they're building AKs. You're like, hey, what's up with these people? They're like, I don't know, but I work on the Upper River. And that's just like, okay. It's like, all right, man. But also, way out in the middle of nowhere, and let me see if I can remember where this is. Oh, dang, man. Like, I don't think I can remember where it... Hang on. I can eventually find it. Hang on. Here we go. Here at Izhevsk is the Izhevsk arms manufacturer, or the Izhevsk arsenal, which has been famous around the world for producing Kalashnikovs, or AKs for the large part of different kinds. This is actually the Kalashnikov factory right here, which still to this day produces small arms like the AK-12 and the AK-74 for the Russian Federation. It's interesting to think that these factories are known because they produce the rifles, but the factories that produce the ammunition and the gunpowder for those rifles to actually be usable are completely unknown. Because I actually did not know until the news came out that one of the major gunpowder manufactories in the whole of Russia was just in Kotovsk. I did not even know. Because when we looked at this town the other day, I actually told you, well, it's kind of a small town, and, it kind of looks mostly abandoned. There's no major industry here. Half of the town is a gunpowder plant. Didn't even know it. And you can actually see it down here. I don't know why I was blind on this, but this also appears to be an extension of the gunpowder plant, which you can also see the perimeter fence around right here. But anyways, moving on from that, still a very significant hit, and once again causing significant damage to the Russian industry's warfighting abilities. But moving on from that, it appears that there is another serious consideration to be made at this point with what's going on in the Western world in support of Ukraine. But before we move on from that, it's more important to talk about what's going on in Moscow with the presidential decree that came out today ordering the mobilization of the reservists for regular army training. And a lot of people are wondering, who is Putin escalating the war against? What is this specific action supposed to be doing? Is it supposed to be escalating the war with Ukraine and making it very clear to Ukraine and the West that they will be able to keep the war in Ukraine going, even if it looks like the economy is about to collapse any day now? Or are they trying to create a larger conflict with the Western world? And once again, trying to largely create a major situation to where the West is forced into negotiations, or they may face a large conventional war with the Russian Federation, which the Russians would lose, funnily enough, or they may actually be trying to prepare for a major war to begin a nuclear exchange, or to justify it for the large part. But a lot of people have been throwing in their opinions, and we have seen a wide variety, as a matter of fact, of different ideas that have come forward tonight. It seems as though there's largely two different camps. Some people saying that he's escalating Ukraine, and others saying he's escalating with the West. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Who is his target with this mobilization for the large part?
So it looks like 51% of the audience thinks that he's escalating with Ukraine solely, while 38% said he's escalating specifically with the Western countries, and 6% said he's simply taking precautions like any other country would do while they're at war. And this is a bit of a tricky one, honestly. We actually discussed this before we started the stream tonight, and I'm a little bit uncertain about this, because for Putin to mobilize the reserves, he could simply be trying to replace the losses on the battlefield with these reserve soldiers. But at the same time, with these alleged negotiations about to take place, this could be a bluff to maybe bluff the West into thinking that maybe Putin's ready to keep the war going indefinitely. And that could be part of it as well. Or he could be actually doing this to intimidate the West, as if he's preparing to attack a NATO country. I'm really not sure, to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to actually be with the 6% that said unsure and undecided. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would actually have to say that it's a very tough one to answer as well, but I would generally believe that he's most likely escalating within the confines of the Ukraine war. I might be wrong, and there's a good chance that I could be wrong. I would be honest, it's probably a 50-50 option on which way it would go, and no one's really wrong with an answer that they're giving. But in my personal opinion, if I had to say it was one or the other, I believe he would be escalating against Ukraine. The mobilization of mobics is not something that would scare the West. Mobics are highly untrained, and that's why they're having to be mobilized right now for regular army training, is the fact that they hardly have any training in the first place. And generally, conscript forces, at least historically, historically have been proven to do horrendously against professional soldiers, specifically from Western countries, which are soldiery by profession. The Russian mobics, the conscripts for a large part, are soldiers by circumstance, or really by happenstance for the large part. They have been forced into the military, usually on a 1-year contract, meaning that they complete their training in about 6 months, and then they get out 6 months later. They're hardly even around to get familiarized with any of their jobs or to have enough training to actually truly be considered a professional force. Much less than that, usually the morale in these units is incredibly low, and it's incredibly easy to break and shatter these units on the front line without them even taking serious amounts of losses. Just taking sustained rifle fire could lead them to retreat or go into a complete unmitigated rout. With this in mind, mobilizing these forces to try and conduct a war against the West would be a pretty much a suicidal action by the Russian Federation if all of those forces were being used in that specific role. They would not succeed. They would have an incredibly difficult time even dealing with the smaller armies of the Baltic states, much less when they ran into heavy resistance from the Polish, which would be some of the first armed forces to respond, Germany, France, the UK, and then the United States. Those mobics just simply would not be able to hold up against such a well-trained and disciplined ground army, much less the massive supporting elements of these militaries that are not on the ground but are in the skies and the seas, helping to support the ground forces. That would be something that would be completely suicidal by the Russians. I believe that entirely. So these have to be mobilized by any logical framework, and the Russians could be working illogically here, and that's why I could be wrong. But working off of a logical framework, they would have to be mobilizing these forces so that way they could send them towards Ukraine. Because in Ukraine, we already know that there's a decent amount of mobics that are already fighting there, but at the same time, they're dying in large numbers. And to keep them constantly refreshed and to keep mobics out there, they have to have a large number of them. And so I believe that these are largely being mobilized and given regular army training so that way when the peace talks fail or don't even happen, the Russian Federation can keep sustaining the incredibly high losses, the momentous losses that they're taking every day by mobilizing the mobics and just throwing them into the war. So that way, hopefully, at some point, they'll be able to outlast long enough that the United States and Ukraine might start to waver and possibly start to concede further in negotiations. Or at least that's what the Russian plan, I believe at this point, would most likely be.
Honestly, after hearing that, I would probably change my answer from unsure to really say that it seems like Putin is doing this probably most likely to bluff the United States in negotiations, because this would obviously be playing into the hands of the Russian negotiators by saying, look, we just mobilized a ton of reserves and we're ready to keep the war going indefinitely. So we don't have to make a deal here today. We can simply walk from the table and not have to worry about it because we're ready to go. We got the guns loaded already and we're going to keep fighting in Ukraine until Ukraine crumbles. That's what the Putin negotiators could end up saying. And by making this action here with the reserves, that would back that up with some evidence. So it maybe is just for negotiation purposes, because once again, I really don't think they're going to send in the reserves to attack a NATO country right now, because they're still struggling inside of Ukraine. So for them to move on to a NATO country would be crazy. Like the enforcer said, suicidal. So probably for upper hand in negotiations would be my guess.
I would have to say that I do believe that it's most likely for an upper hand, or it's to try and continue the war. Largely, I believe you and me are saying the same thing. You're saying it's to bluff the West. I'm saying it's to prolong the war. But either way, they're trying to pretty much play a mind game with the United States, which is a primary, interestingly enough, negotiating partner in a possible peace talk here in the future, not Ukraine, into thinking that the war could continue and that Western support is pointless because the Russians could just simply outlast our political support for keeping the war in Ukraine going. That might actually be the primary motive for the Russian Federation at this point, to mobilize the mobics and then try and put them out onto the front lines in Ukraine, most likely. So with that, I hope we were able to address that entire ordeal fairly well, but it also appears that that might not work too well, because it appears that the French and the British have teamed up again. It's a teaming up of the century, to be entirely honest, or it's a teaming up of a century. The British and the French have teamed up largely since the Crimean War at this point to deal with people that they don't like. They go around together just beating folks up. They did it in the Crimean War, they did it in World War I and World War II, and they've also done it in a couple of other conflicts since then, like the Suez Crisis of 1956. But beyond that, the French and the British appear to possibly be teaming up again, as there's been a floating around today of an idea by by both the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the President of the Republic of France that there may be the deployment of British and French soldiers to Ukraine as a peacekeeping contention after any potential deal is stricken to end the war in Ukraine. One U.S. floated idea is that Western soldiers could man an 800-mile border between the new Ukrainian and Russian borders that currently exist, with a demilitarized buffer zone established. The President of France is pushing the idea that European allies could be deployed on the ground to play such a role, and some of his discussions with other leaders have become public. But it appears that the British and the French are once again teaming up to try and create a more stable border situation in a post-war Ukrainian world if the peace negotiation was to concede a large amount of territory that Ukraine legally holds to the Russian Federation. We have not seen at this moment that the French have moved back onto their warlike statements of the past, where they said if the Russian Federation starts pushing Ukraine too hard, the French would enter the war on the side of Ukraine and actively engage Russian forces on the ground. We haven't seen that direct statement from the French yet. It does appear that they're starting to temper it down a little bit more and get onto the page that Western forces would be deployed in Ukraine post-war, which most likely would be a no deal at this point for the Russian Federation, and that point alone would most likely make the talks completely fail once the peace negotiations even try to begin. And we don't even think that they're going to begin at this point, because it appears that the Russians and the United States are becoming very clear at this point on their standpoints. The United States doesn't see that the Russian Federation is willing to bend, and the Russian Federation isn't willing to bend in negotiations. And so both sides are fairly certain at this point, it seems, before we even get to the peace negotiations, that the war will still carry on for some time before peace negotiations are even attempted.
Also, by the way, wouldn't it be like the equivalent of giving Ukraine NATO membership by putting, NATO peacekeeping forces inside of Ukraine after the fact? Even if they didn't have official NATO status per se, like in Ukraine, putting those troops there if they were attacked would probably trigger an Article 5 response if they were attacked by Russia. So, in my opinion, I would say it's almost the same as NATO membership, just in a different way, just repackaged.
It pretty much is. It's almost like a hybrid way. It's kind of like how Kosovo is not officially a part of Ukraine, but officially it is, because there's NATO peacekeepers in Kosovo almost 24/7. And if Serbia does anything against Kosovo, NATO largely responds against Serbia. Like, for example, back in the 90s, when we were involved in the situation in Kosovo full time for the large part. That's largely the case with this. If there were peacekeepers deployed in Ukraine, in the Russians' mind, and really as far as it's concerned, then the Russians would be correct in thinking this. Ukraine has practically entered NATO at that point. It's just that it's unofficial. NATO peacekeeping troops would be manning a demilitarized zone facing down the Russian army over a 800-mile-long front line for the large part, because if anything kicked off, it's not a border, it's a front line. And the Russian Federation would consider that an absolute no deal. That may as well already be admitting Ukraine into NATO, and that would be something that they would be entirely against, at least right now, until we drive them to their knees later, or the Russian Federation's government collapses. So it's a little funny to see that the French and the British are suggesting this, because of that suggestion alone would most likely make the Russians walk away from the table and then move the United States straight into the peace through strength strategy that we're about to see put into play, which probably...
Yeah. And also, by the way, real quick, I saw someone in the live chat say this. Actually, several people said it. They said, no, that wouldn't trigger Article 5 because it's not happening on a NATO member territory. It doesn't have to be on a NATO member territory for this to happen, because Article 5 is not worded that way. It's actually worded, it says here that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. And once again, that would mean a collective defense response by the NATO alliance. So it could be construed to mean that if NATO forces that are deployed after the war finishes inside of Ukraine, that would still be a NATO force being attacked by Russia, which is not a NATO member, and that could trigger the collective defense response if they decide to interpret it that way. So no, it doesn't have to be necessarily on a NATO member's territory for that to actually be triggered.
Now, everyone, that didn't sound like paper, that sounded like 10, but let's look at the article itself. Article 6, which is the one that matters, because Article 4 says, if anyone gets attacked, let's all get together and curb stomp them, and then Article 5 says how you curb stomp them. Article 6 is what happens, or what will happen, for Article 4 and Article 5 to be brought in place. So let's read it again, just to make sure that everyone here knows exactly what it says, because the wordage in this charter is what counts entirely. For the purpose of Article 5, an armed attack on one or more of the parties is deemed to include an armed attack on the territory of any of the parties, or, more importantly, the second one, on the forces, vessels, or aircraft of any of the parties when in or over these territories, or any other area in Europe in which occupation forces of any of the parties were stationed on the date when the treaty entered into force. But that has actually been amended in the modern charter to actually include anywhere where NATO peacekeeping forces are in Europe. And that's because of the whole Kosovo situation and everything, is because then they had to come up with a justification in the future. So there was a if Serbia was to attack a NATO peacekeeping force, for them to invoke Article 5 against Serbia. So this was actually amended, this entire area here, to include that it's really an attack on any of NATO's armed forces within the area of Europe. So technically, Ukraine is in Europe, and if there was a peacekeeping force in Ukraine and the Russians ended up bombing them, it wouldn't just be a, oh well, I guess that is what it is kind of a situation. That would be something that Article 4 and then Article 5 could be invoked over and actually acted upon, because that would be a direct attack upon the armed forces of a NATO country by a hostile power, and that would be the necessary provocation to begin a full-blown defensive war on NATO's part, activating Article 5 in the NATO Charter. So that is...
And also, you know, even with the wording being however it is, if NATO decides to interpret it differently, they can simply say, okay, we're interpreting it newly now. Like before we thought, okay, it has to be on NATO territory, generally speaking, even though the wording says something different. They can just simply say, we've decided to interpret this as NATO forces inside of Ukraine being attacked by Russia means it's time to go to war. Because all it takes is a vote by the countries to make that happen. And if they decide to, you know, look at it a different way, they can simply look at it differently and just say, we're going to start going to war with Russia. It can work like that.
And that is also true as well. Interpretation does have a lot to do. Also, I saw someone say something that is not true. I want to make sure to address this really quickly, because we see a lot of people say things that are not true whenever we talk about NATO, because a lot of people really don't understand what NATO is. Like some people say, you know, like people have got to pay their fair share into the NATO bucket when there is no NATO bucket for the large part. It's actually GDP defense spending quotas. But beyond that, someone said when operating under the banner of NATO as a huge asterisk to what we were claiming. That's not true, because no one operates under the flag of NATO. NATO does not exist beyond the official framework of that charter. Yes, there is a NATO headquarters in Brussels, and yes, there are some joint resources that are used by NATO as a whole, such as surveillance and reconnaissance equipment that usually is operating somewhere at this point in Romania, Poland, the Baltic states, and very rarely in Finland. Yes, there are those kinds of resources, but they are very few and far in between. NATO is a military alliance comprising dozens of countries within the area of the North Atlantic, north of the Tropic of Cancer, and west of a specific parallel. These forces, actually I believe it's a longitude, not a parallel, but beyond that, these forces represent their nations. And NATO is a collective defensive pact amongst these nations, not people waving NATO flags. So, no, if you go onto the battlefield waving a NATO flag, people are not going to look at you as, oh, yes, they are following the charter. They are going to look at you as a goof, because no one uses the NATO flag in any semblance of NATO beyond the NATO headquarters or the jointly used NATO assets. And even then, those assets are manned and equipped by specific armed forces of any of those individual countries. Poland has the Polish army. It does not have the NATO army. It has the Polish army. If the Polish army is attacked either inside of Europe or on Polish territory, that is considered an attack on NATO. When 9/11 happened, which was Al-Qaeda slamming aircraft into the Twin Towers in New York City, they did not go, well, the Twin Towers weren't flying a NATO flag at the time of that attack, so Article 5 cannot be invoked by technicality. No, Article 5 was actually invoked for the only time in history, and I did not see anyone inside of the Twin Towers waving a flag of NATO, and I did not see a NATO flag waving over the top of the building that would have justified an Article 5 invocation by that technicality. An army of a country that is in NATO is considered a part of NATO. In point. There is no other stipulations to that. You don't have to be flying a flag of NATO. You don't have to be putting a fish in your back pocket on a Sunday and walking backwards down the street towards a red light to be in NATO. If you're in NATO, you're in NATO, and your armed forces are considered a part of NATO. And so I hope that does address that fairly well and kind of clear up a lot of the misconceptions about the charter, because a lot of people misunderstand the charter a great deal, a decent amount of the time, and we want to make sure to clear that up, because even some people who put out YouTube information about it don't really get it right sometimes, because I don't believe they read the charter. I believe they go off of what people think NATO is. But beyond that, a lot of people are talking about the French and British coalition that's being considered to deploy peacekeeping troops into Ukraine in the post-war situation. And a lot of people are talking about what they think on this, and it really does seem like this one's fairly split. Some people are saying that they're just yapping. Some people are saying that they're serious, and it seems fairly legit, especially considering what the French have been saying throughout the course of the war. Also, that could be used for and against them. The French have been actively in support of getting into Ukraine through the course of the war, but a lot of people could also use that against them because they've never gotten involved in the war. They've just talked about it. So either way you interpret that, you can look at them as being master yappers or being legit about it. It's just that the Russians haven't crossed the line yet. Some others are saying that it's a terrible idea and just to scrap that entirely, and others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that's a great idea, or they're just yapping, or do you think it's a terrible idea?
All right, so this one is almost split even. Almost. It was a minute ago at least, but now it's kind of not. But it looks like 40% said they are just yapping again, while 44% said they are serious and it seems legit, and 7% said that that's a really bad idea and they should just scrap it and forget everything. And on this one, I would say generally the point is going to be moot because Russia will never agree to this till their dying days while Putin is in charge of that country. This is the same in Russia's view as having NATO membership inside of Ukraine, and they are not going to agree to that. And really, it's a good thought by France and Britain, but I think even the two French and British leaders know that this is not even a real possibility, but they're taking the opportunity to sound like tough guys and say this while they know it's not an actual thing that's going to ever happen. So I would say they're generally just yapping, and it doesn't seem legit to me. It seems like just some posturing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I believe that this most likely is maybe legitimate because it's not like a situation where France was considering in the past sending forces into Ukraine just because they thought the war wasn't going well for Ukraine. This is something that will be happening in a peacetime scenario where largely will be something along the lines of the Korean DMZ or really just any normal standoff that was being conducted against the Soviet Union throughout the entirety of the Cold War on the face of Europe. I think for that reason, this is actually a serious consideration because if NATO was, I really don't even know why it's a French-UK thing, because if NATO forces were going to be moved into Ukraine, the French and British would already be a part of that, along with everyone else who's in NATO. So I don't really know why they're off on their own, like, hey, we ought to do this, because if NATO says, you know, Ukraine isn't going to be in NATO, but we're also going to create a NATO-manned DMZ inside of Ukraine, they would already be a part of that, whether they talked about it amongst themselves or not. But I do believe that this is probably a serious consideration because it seems that a key Western interest at this point is to try and get Ukraine in NATO or give them some sort of physical NATO military protection into the future to avoid a restart of the war once the Russian Federation is able to financially recover. Although I'll be honest with y'all, the Russian Federation financially recovering will probably take about 2 to 3 decades at this point with the amount of damage that they've sustained, because it took the Russian Federation about 30 years from the collapse of the Soviet Union to get ready to even try to conduct successfully a major conventional war, which is the war we're talking about right now. And even still, with 30 years of preparation time since the collapse of the Soviet Union, they are failing at conducting a conventional war. So I'll be honest with y'all, I think by the time they'd ever be ready to invade Ukraine again or attempt another war in Ukraine, the Russian Federation would have completely changed. I think Putin would be dead by then, and the government may have gone a completely different path by that point than the one we're seeing right now under Putin. So the NATO...
And also, Enforcer, also, by the way, another consideration I don't think we've taken into consideration is the U.S. going to even sign off on this? Because I know people don't like to hear this because it makes Europeans angry that it works this way, but it simply does work this way. The United States is the leader of NATO, even though it's not specified that way. It's the understood leader of NATO.
Oh,
they basically have
specified.
to give. Say what?
It is specified, I believe, because in some areas of the NATO charter, they say you have to give a letter to Big Daddy America, and then Big Daddy America will do something. But let me go see, because it is in. Here we go. Let's see here. Oh, dang, man, it's in here somewhere. Oh, yeah, here. The parties made by unanimous agreement. And then, let's see here. Any state so invited may become a party to the treaty by depositing its instrument of accession with the government of the United States of America. So in this,
That's just for a session, though. I'm talking about, like, for example, if France and the UK decided unilaterally to deploy troops, NATO troops, of course, because they are both in NATO, if they went to Ukraine, the U.S. would have to sign off on that, even though it's not specified in the charter. That's the way it works. The U.S. is the leader of it, as the de facto leader of it. We have the most, money in the military, the largest military, and things like that. So we're the ones with the ultimate say. That's just the way it works in reality. I don't think the U.S. would ever sign off on sending NATO forces to Ukraine without us being involved in it. And also another thing as well, do we really want to occupy Ukraine with, like, for example, French and British troops versus simply just giving Ukraine NATO membership? Because I don't think Ukraine would want their country occupied with a bunch of bases of foreign countries in their country. I don't think they'd really want that. I wouldn't want it if I was in charge of Ukraine. I'd be like, just give us the NATO membership, and if something happens, then y'all show up instead of occupying our country basically with all your bases. That's just me though. But what are you thinking, Forster?
I don't know. That might be a consideration, especially if there's any guy around like, we could make better guns than America if we just had the money, like that might actually be like a serious consideration by the Ukrainians. Who knows? But still, once again, though, I wanted to point this out, Matthew. In Article 13, to leave NATO, the only country you got to notify is America, and then America will notify everyone else that you left. So it looks as though, at least by the general framework of the NATO Charter, it's pretty much recognized that America is the leader of the thing, because Article 10 and Article 13 largely lay out the only people you have to let know that you actually are joining NATO or leaving NATO is the United States, and then they'll tell everyone else. So it largely does put the United States by de facto at that point in the position of heading NATO, because they're in charge of accepting new members and then accepting that they're leaving. No one else is. It's not anything that has to be done by council beyond that. And while, of course, Article 5 will be considered in a forum, the United States does have the major say. It is the largest economic and military power in the alliance, and so if it wasn't even baked into the charter, it still would be understood that the United States is going to be the one calling the shots as the leader of the sphere. So
that's true. And also think about this too, Enforcer. I think if Russia had to choose between the two evils in their view, for example, having NATO forces occupy Ukraine versus simply letting Ukraine have NATO membership, it's actually worse to have the soldiers literally in Ukraine, because Putin's been saying the whole time, with this propaganda he keeps spewing, that NATO's encroaching on Russia's borders and they're about to get us, they're going to attack us, they're right here, they're moving in, and it's all over. That's a justification for propaganda reasons the whole time. So with NATO membership, it's just an idea. Like, for example, if Russia attacks Ukraine, then NATO's going to show up. But it's actually worse to have the troops deployed, because that literally means they're actually physically right there on the Russian border at that point. So that's actually a worst case scenario than just giving them NATO membership.
I would agree. It may actually be. And also, I see a lot of people talking about this in the chat, too. DT just asked, can someone get kicked out of NATO? No, there actually is no provision in the charter to kick someone out of NATO. So you can't put that up to popular vote. Once someone's in, they're in. And the only way that they can leave is by leaving voluntarily. And that's laid out under Article 13 of the charter, like we were just reading. And if a country wants to leave, all they have to do is write a letter. So we would largely assume that that's the executive of whatever government is leaving NATO. They would write a letter to the United States saying, we're leaving, signed so-and-so, and then the United States would inform every other government in NATO, hey, by the way, so-and-so left, signed so-and-so right here, they're gone. They're not in NATO anymore. And that's the only way that someone can leave. Interestingly enough, France actually did that in 1955 when Charles de Gaulle became the president, because he said, I hate these stupid Americans trying to be in my country, and he literally just left. And so for the large majority of the Cold War, France just wasn't in NATO. France actually joined NATO again after the end of the Cold War, I believe in the 90s. So that's a wild thing about France. But also beyond that, what's even weirder is that even though France was not in NATO, France would still largely make most of their weapons and equipment to NATO spec. Just in case if a war did begin, the plan was that they pretty much immediately rejoin NATO. But just for principle, I suppose, they were not in NATO. It's a weird thing. But anyways, moving on from that, I hope that answers that question well. And also, I believe there was another one. There was actually a fairly interesting one. Let's see. Hang on here. Dang, man, the chat's flying so fast, it's hard to find it.
Chat's booking it tonight.
Yeah, I mean, oh my lord, it's actually insanely fast. I can't even go back and find the question I was looking for. It was a good one. I can't even remember who threw it in because it's so far back at this point. Let's see here. Dang. Goodness gracious. Man, dang it, I can't find it. I'm just gonna have to give up. Y'all are typing so fast in the chat tonight. Huge thanks, by the way, for really being engaged tonight, everyone, that it's hard to go find the live chat I was about to answer. But speaking of live chats and answering questions, let's get to a couple of questions right now. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first super chat of the night is going to go to a channel legend that makes a big return yet again. This time it is Sylvester the Cat. And thank you very much, Sylvester, for that massive $300 donation and helping to keep the channel running. And we appreciate that very much. The largest support of the night and, of course, very generous support. They said, hello, Matt and Enforcer, and hello, Sylvester. They said the Russians should run out of tanks by the end of this year. And does that not foreclose any possibility of a military victory for the Russians? And don't talk often, but always there, and at least spring tanker.
And I got to thank you for the massive support, Sylvester the Cat, at helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that that is absolutely amazing, the support that you threw. And it helps us to keep this channel running in and day out. And it helps us to keep this thing on the streams ad-free and sponsor-free. And I got to thank you massively for that and helping us to keep this thing rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And also, I have heard that they are expected to run out of main battle tanks by the end of the year, including the ones that they've been pulling out of reserve and largely refurbishing to get into operational condition. That does largely seem to be true at this point. And it kind of forecloses the fact that they can't really conduct an offensive, but it doesn't really stop the fact that they could conduct a defensive from where they are right now. Tanks inherently are an offensive weapon, and from their inception on the battlefields of World War I, when the British first used tanks at the Battle of the Somme, tanks have been largely an instrument of offense. Very rarely do they get used in a defensive role, at least as their primary task. Generally, the tank is supposed to pretty much be a rolling armored assault gun to be able to provide heavier direct line of sight fire support for advancing infantry on the battlefield. That's why in usual tactics and strategy employed by Western nations, really since the inception of the tank doesn't lead the infantry, the tank follows the infantry to wherever they're going, because it's not supposed to be an upfront kind of a attacking sort of a system. It's really more so of a supporting system for the infantry. But beyond that, the Russian Federation, if they lose practically all of their armor, would not be able to conduct successful offensive actions from that point, because they would not have the prerequisite direct line of sight fire support that a tank provides to be able to support their infantry, at least technically, although we've never really seen them use tanks like that. We've never really even seen Ukraine use a tank like that at all in this war. They just seem to really charge them ahead of the infantry and use them as go-getters, and honestly, that doesn't really work. Like, neither side has shown that that works. That's just poor planning. But beyond that, moving on from that whole side note, because that's a rabbit hole, generally they wouldn't be able to conduct an offensive, but they would be able to conduct a defensive, because in the modern day, artillery is largely the main determinant of a defensive battle and an offensive battle. Really, artillery is the winner of wars, even in the modern day. And if the Russian Federation is able to maintain some form of anti-tank weaponry, some limited air defense systems, and a decent amount of artillery support for their frontline infantry, even with a complete lack of tanks, they would be able to conduct successful defensive operations against Ukraine and largely keep themselves where they are right now. The tank really just stops them from being able to conduct offensive actions in the future, and this also could be seen, just to make sure that we put in some professional analysis here, by a press conference that was made by General Schwarzkopf during the Gulf War in 1991. There's a famous press conference on YouTube, and it was famous back in the day when it was aired on CNN, of all things. CNN has really fallen since then, but beyond that, one thing that is interesting is that General Schwarzkopf talked about the main war goals of the United States military and the coalition during the Gulf War, and he stated, largely towards the latter end of his press conference, that not only was it to push the Iraqis out of Kuwait, which was illegally occupied by the Iraqis at the time, but it was also to cut down the Iraqi army to size, and one of the main things was to completely destroy their offensive abilities, being able to invade another country. And the primary thing that Schwarzkopf said was a main determinant of offensive actions at that time was a large group of armored forces, main battle tanks and armored personnel carriers. And he stated that nearly 80% of all of Iraq's armored forces have been destroyed, and for this reason, Iraq would be completely militarily incapable of conducting offensive wars in the future, which he was actually correct in, and they were actually not even able to conduct a defensive war when we invaded them about 12 years later and occupied Iraq for a little while. So with that, I hope that does address that question incredibly well, Sylvester the Cat. But still, thank you so much once again for support. And of course, you don't talk often, but you are an old guard and a legend of the channel, Sylvester the Cat. And I got to thank you for being here tonight. I got to thank you for the wildly massive support. And I got to thank you for being a Leaf Spring tanker. One of the few Leaf Spring tankers we have right here, right now on the stream. But we thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope you've been enjoying the news and analysis so far. And I hope you've been enjoying the high-stepping, high-flying kind of news report that the Enforcer channel has been famous for over the entirety of the war, because I finally got my voice back completely over the past few days, and so I can now once again rev that thing up to 10 and get straight into the news coverage like we used to do. And so with that, a huge thanks once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, but a massive thanks to you so much once again for that support.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here is going to go to none other than BC Skyman, yet another channel legend, one of the founding legends. And BC put in a $70 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. BC Skyman, for that support. And sadly, though, I did not see a comment. He left a super sticker, though, and we liked that one very much. Sadly, I don't have it in front of me, though. That's why I'm sort of not being very vague about it. But thank you very much, BC, for that support and helping to keep us running. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, BC Skyman, an absolute legend and old guard of the stream. BC Skyman has been here since day 4. I know that because I saw him on the stream on day 4, and he's been here ever since. So as of right now, BC Skyman has been with this channel almost every single day since day 1054, and it's, well, for 1054 days, and it really is insane to think that folks have been with us for that long, and specifically to know that BC Skyman has been with us pretty much every single step of the way. I gotta thank you for the huge support, BC Skyman. Of course, you didn't throw in a comment. That's normal for BC Skyman, but we know that that support has a lot of kind intentions and kind words behind it, because back in the day, BC Skyman actually used to put words in the super chat, and I'm talking about years ago, and they always were incredibly nice things. So we know whenever there's a super chat that comes in from BC Skyman, it's just laced with a lot of appreciation for the channel, and we thank you so much for that greatly, BC Skyman, and we thank you for helping this channel to continue running 1054 days into the future. Of course, you are an integral part of the Lee Spring Army, and we thank you so much once again for being here with us tonight and enjoying the massive news coverage that we have right now. And so with that, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're getting right back into the rest of the news, and particularly the actual news from the Ukrainian front lines. So what do we have for our final question of this segment, Matthew?
All right, so this one is going to go to Gunfox61, also known as Medic Fox, also longtime channel legend as well, and he puts in a very generous $50 donation, and thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support. They said today, Boca Chica, Texas marked the first test flight of the Starship V2, also the first time a Raptor 314 flew for a second time, and the booster was caught for a second time, and a failure of the fuel system is likely the cause of the loss of the Ship 33. Also, question from the chat. And Gunfox, we saw the video of that come out today. I'll be honest, I opened Twitter to check the news midday. I saw that video and I didn't see the caption above it. I was like, oh my God, what has happened? Somebody's fired a ballistic missile and it's gone and it's blown up in the sky. Yeah, I was like horrified for a minute. I was like, oh no, what has happened? Then I read the caption and it was a Starship blowing up. And I was like, damn, that was some pretty bad like debris coming off of that. Apparently some planes had to evacuate the area too to get away from it. The FAA redirected some flights, but let's take a look, Enforcer. It's crazy footage.
This is it. This is the remnants of the Starship after it blew up in largely high altitude, in a high altitude area. I'm not saying in low Earth orbit, but it was getting close to that.
Yeah, it was a lot. Also, just like going right over a really like beautiful area of the world in the Caribbean too. That's a hell of a sight there.
Yeah, it's wild, but from what we generally understand at this point, the Starship exploded at some point during the post-boost phase and getting very close to the mid-course phase of its flight, much like any other standard missile. I do have to say this is a very interesting scenario. Generally, rockets do not explode at this point. That's highly rare and unlikely. That's why we saw that pretty much an immediate NOTAM had to be issued around the area where the debris was coming back in, because generally rockets are planned to not explode at this point of their flight. Rockets explode a great deal, and I've largely been a massive proponent of always telling people that, because people have been an unbeliever in the Starship program for quite some years, because they always say, oh look, they're blowing up, and I guess those people have never looked at space programs, because pretty much every single rocket design has blown up at some point in testing, usually at the pad. But that's what's incredibly exceptional about this failure, is that this failure did not happen right off the pad, because usually a rocket will fail somewhere around launch. Right when it's leaving the pad or on the pad, that's the most likely time that a rocket will explode. That's the most dangerous time in launch, and that's why in the modern day, well, ever since a specific disaster happened in the Soviet Union that killed pretty much everyone in the Soviet space program, that's why since then they evacuate miles around the pad, because if it was to explode, it's going to explode then, when it's the closest to people and it can pose the greatest danger. It's very rare to see something like this, and this seems to be something that probably needs to be investigated heavily by SpaceX, or maybe it should always be investigated by the NTSB, which you can always rely on as a neutral third party to report on disasters and accidents and to give safety advisories or really suggestions. The NTSB is always great for that. But this was a very weird thing to see, and I do believe that there should be a serious investigation into this, because for a rocket to explode largely at this phase of its flight, towards the post-boost phase and mid-course phase, that shows that there was something that may have been, and I'm not saying that it did happen, I'm just saying that it may have been not manufactured properly, tested properly, or have been installed properly. That's usually why something like this would happen at this phase of the flight. Generally, that
could have been just something. It could have been just an anomaly that they didn't predict in the simulations, perhaps, and maybe it was just something they were maybe hoping to iron out with this test. I don't really understand the world of like rocket testing, because they expect to have a lot of failures, like you're saying, Enforcer. But at the same time, it's like, at what point is a failure considered a bad failure versus a good failure, which you learn from? I don't really understand the distinction.
Yeah, I don't, I wouldn't really know it much either. I'm not a rocket scientist, want to make that a little clear. But one thing I do know is that failures at this point in flight are fairly rare, because that's an easy statistic that you can get out there online, is much like aircraft, which have their points of failure usually right at takeoff or landing. That's usually when most air disasters happen, and you can go check out the Smithsonian's series called Air Disasters on that, and you'll see that most incidents, except for the fairly rare and famous ones, happen at takeoff and landing, and generally with rocketry, most of the failures happen at takeoff and landing as well. It's very rare to see something like this happen at that point in the flight. But anyways, moving on from that, hopefully we'll be able to see that this issue is ironed out in the future, because the Starship program is vital for U.S. space exploration projects of the future. It just simply is the highest payload, highest yield sort of space vehicle that can be used at an economic cost, and for this reason it is going to be, without a doubt, the future of U.S. space travel, for whatever reasons those may be, whether it be for exploration or industrial purposes. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well, Gunfox 61, because that was something very interesting to see today. Interestingly enough, we actually have some folks who work for SpaceX here. I don't know who they are, but I do thank you for letting us know about that, Gunfox 61, because that's a fairly interesting thing to hear directly from you about it. And I gotta thank you once again for the support, wink wink nudge nudge, and letting us know about this very thing. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and it is time for us to get right back into the news and cover all of the major frontline events that have happened in Ukraine today. And so moving on into Ukraine, we were able to see that near the front lines, the Ukrainian border guards were once again denying papers and forcibly deporting Russian forces that had entered the country. We can see right here a Russian drone that's about to be deported. Boom! And there it goes right back to Russia. We can now see the Ukrainians making sure to take out some armored vehicles, which appear to have the incorrect licensing information. They have Russian licenses. Ukraine only accepts Ukrainian licenses. They are now going to be dispelling these vehicles from the country to ensure a largely a national control of the licensing regulations inside the country. And we can see that those BMPs are beginning to cook.
You can call in ice, because these tanks are heading back to where they were made.
Oh, that was like perfect, man. Literally bounced it off the rim. Kobe!
Damn. Turned into a pressure cooker in a crock pot.
Man, I'm telling you what, man. The Colonel Sanders came around and said, that's a good pressure cooker right there. It's like, we're going to cook up some mean chicken in that thing. I'll be honest with y'all, like, KFC actually stands the test of time. The chicken does, at least. I don't think anything else does on their menu. Because, like, the mashed... Have y'all ever tasted the gravy that they put on those mashed potatoes? It tastes like wall paste. But
it's good. It's good. Hey, come on now. Come on. KFC is one of the most popular fast food chains around the world. Like, it's actually very popular in Asia. Too. It's crazy how widespread KFC is.
In Japan, they actually KFC on Christmas Day, because I believe it was the vice CEO of KFC in the 70s in Japan for the Japanese branch, told the Japanese people, hey, by the way, Americans eat KFC on Christmas. It's like a thing over there. So everyone in Japan went, oh, really? That's cool. And so now every year, They eat KFC on Christmas Day in Japan. It's just a thing that they do. It's really interesting how that turned into an actual cultural thing in Japan, really based off of a lie. But anyways, moving on from that and into Kursk, we were also able to see that dozens of BMDs have been wiped out today. These are Russian. You can tell by the little Z that they have on all their vehicles, which lets us know that this is a thing to rejoice. Look at the destruction. Oh
Man,
my
it's been
goodness.
shredded. Look at that. Look at that fake grass too. It was all like neon green and stuff like that. Look, they're doing some hellscaping.
Man, they got the Russians out there with the toxic goop and said, make sure to paint the grass with toxic goop so that way it really shines in the dark. And we also got to see more destroyed BMDs and this one as well. What is really wild about this is that I don't really know what unit these are coming from, because BMD-2s really aren't used a lot outside of VDV units. Sometimes, rarely, we've seen them being used by naval infantry, which might suggest that these are being used by the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, but at this moment, I do not know of any VDV units that are actively involved in the fighting in the Kursk Oblast. I might be mistaken on that. Maybe there is a unit in the area, but it's just extremely rare to see BMDs. We've usually seen these down in the southern front near Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, as the VDV has been charged with the responsibility of defending the Russian front line near to the Dnipro River, but very rarely at this point have we ever seen BMDs beyond that area, so it's very odd to see such a large concentration of destroyed ones in the Kursk Oblast. But moving on from that, and out of that wild or weird piece of news today, we were also able to see that the Russians were getting hit in Kursk pretty heavily by the 47th Mechanized, which hit a OSA AKM. I always almost call that thing an Okra, but here's the clip of the OSA being knocked out.
Oh, and it's oh so on fire. Look at that. Oh my.
Oh my, time for me to shit on William Shatner for the 9,000th time. Oh my.
Oh my. Taking a shot on Shatner.
I guess you could say that I took a shot on Shatner. Oh my.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
You stole my joke.
Yeah,
Literally
I said-
for 2 seconds after I said it.
Look, Jack, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what your country can, what you can do. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
anyway.
come on, Jack.
Man, moving on from that was totally unintentional, by the way, the whole stammering thing right there that I did. Like, I actually just screwed up the quote, and it just kind of worked. But anyways, we also get to see this this person here posing, actually, striking a pose next to this destroyed Russian S400. I don't know why the Russians got the S400 that close to the front line for it to be destroyed. They're literally running out of these air defense systems across the country, but somehow they were able to get one close enough to the front lines that it got destroyed by the Ukrainians. So, whoa, Jack, whoa! I gotta tell you, the Russian air defense just isn't as good as it used to be. But moving on from that and out of it.
Listen, it got hit. Anyway.
Listen, look!
You sit there and think I'm gonna let it get away? It's all going according to plan, Jack.
But moving on from that, we also get to see the 95th hitting some Russian forces in this area and watch him slam. Kaboom! Gone.
Someone said, yeah, this is where I get my news, ... Hell yeah. We got the impressions, we got the news, we got the analysis all in one bucket. It's like a KFC, a variety pack or something around here. It's like, it's the best bucket. It's unusual, but it's the best.
Look, Jack, I've talked to more foreign ministers than you ever will.
Look, you think I sit there and take that seriously? It's just like a side gig for me. I mean, like, really, like...
That's like Popeye, Popeye on a different world stage.
Wow!
Wow.
I'm strong to the finish because I get put in a horror movie when I become copyright free. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. Boop, boop. Something like that. But anyways, we can see them hitting the Russians as we are just absolutely clowning right now. And they're hitting him pretty effectively, mind you.
I want to see Putin deposed, and I want to see him become the new low-budget Popeye in the next Popeye movie. That's what I want. He needs to be relegated to that.
Wow! But anyways, dude, I love doing that, man. It's so stupid. But anyways, moving on from that into the next clip, we also get to see some close-in fighting in the Kursk region today by the 41st Mechanized Brigade, or as they call them in Ukrainian, the 41st Okrema Mechanizovnana Brigada, I believe if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But anyways, here's the clip. Oh, and they're firing from the main gun of the tank, the 125 millimeters, right, smoothbore, actually, main cannon. And they are just hammering away at the Russians. I mean,
you know, we might have to have some merch with the Enforcer News Bucket combo on there for $11.99. We might need a shirt with that on there.
Man, honestly, I think we should. I think that'd be a great idea. And also, Glock Glock, who's there, said, "What are you smoking?" Listen, I'm high on life. I don't have to do any of that stuff to be hype. I can be hype naturally. I honestly consider that a skill because most people have to get sloshed or high to do what I do, and I just belt it out naturally. I'm just like that. I'm a barrel full of energy. The Energizer Bunny for the large part. Hey, speaking of which, speaking of the Energizer Bunny, looks like the Ukrainians are going to be keeping the prisoner exchange fund going, kind of like a battery, because they were able to capture another 27 Russian soldiers today inside the Kursk Oblast. Check out this clip. It's a little lengthy. We're going to only show a small part of it. And also, yes, you are correct, Scott Chablam. Coffee, a lot of it. I had like 250 milligrams tonight. So not only am I high on life, I'm also jacked up on caffeine. So,
Yeah, you actually are on something after all. You lied.
Dude, I'm juicing. Like, it's like, who the hell was that biker guy, dude? Like, the bicycler who was like the American hero until they figured out he was juicing the whole time?
I know who you're talking about. It's a cyclist. I don't want to say the name in case I got the wrong person, so I don't know, but I know who you're talking about.
Pennypacker, JP Pennypacker. I'm just kidding. That's not him.
Okay. Oh, I was about to say. I think I know who it is. I want to say his name, though, and falsely accuse him, so I'll hold it back.
The chat's about to explode with the name, I'm sure, in like just a second. And also, we see them here looking at the prisoners. They are talking right now.
That's weird. They won't look at the camera.
Oh, yep, there we go. Everyone's saying it. Lance Armstrong, that's the guy. Like, that is the guy. I know that for sure.
Strong in the arm, eh?
Well, his arms were strong because he was juicing. You know, before he started juicing, he was actually called Lance Arm Weak.
Damn.
Damn.
Are you seeing these guys, by the way? Look at them.
Look at them, man. Like, they're just sitting here. You know, they're about to move on to another one here in a second.
This looks like that singer guy here in America that did that song talking about low pay, no wages. I'm getting high out here, or whatever that song was. That cringy one running around that was like that political song on Fox for a while.
Oh man, I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember.
I can't remember the name of the song, man. What was it called? Y'all know who I'm talking about, right? Like I'm not just crazy out here or something.
I think you might be crazy. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Let's see. That Liver King guy. Yeah, what's crazy is that he admitted to it, and then he kept on telling people to eat bull testicles. It's like, I don't think that shtick's gonna work anymore. It's like, everyone knows the secret is juice. Like, it's like the honest truth. Also, we see this guy right here. We actually know this guy. He has a YouTube account called Southern Born One, and he says, "Idiots, the boat at ya," and then he gets banned, and then he turns into a Russian prisoner, and there he is.
Let's see. Someone's saying north of Richmond. Maybe that's it. I really don't remember the name of it. I know the tune because it was obnoxious as hell. And the guy was like a one-hit wonder. That was like the only song he came up with. And he was just bitching about everything in the song. It was like a country song. And it was honestly terrible. Like the guy couldn't sing at all. And people were just eating it up because it was political. And that was the only reason.
And so we're actually going to end this clip here because they're going around just pretty much getting the statements from all of these prisoners, but there was 27 of them, and that was quite a decent number. We're going to be moving on from that and into our next clips, and we were also able to see a new Ukrainian ground drone in testing. Check this thing out.
Race.
Oh my God, look at that.
Dude, this literally looks like one of those little remote grocery delivery vehicles. Like, I feel like they just, like, nabbed one somewhere and then put a machine gun on top of it, honestly, because it looks like it.
This is the type of ingenuity that I like. Real simple. I mean, this isn't like something Lockheed would come up with. Like, it's not the best in the world, but it works.
Here is why the Ukrainian buggy with machine gun is best in the world. You're sounding like we're about to start it again. The Ukrainian machine gun buggy is cheaper than anything America makes, and not only that, it is the best in the world. But if for some reason it uses an American Browning 50 cal, but Ukraine makes one better, or something like. Anyways, like I'm always going to remember that one video now because of that. Like that left a impression on me. But anyways, this thing is neat.
Also, this thing has garden tires on it, by the way. That's literally off a garden buggy. Are you noticing that?
I am noticing that. Yeah,
like that. Home Depot special.
Man, you know, the new season of BattleBots out in Ukraine is going to be wild this year with them having machine guns on them and everything. Like they're gonna have to clear out the arena for this. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see a tank designed to lay razor wire. I've never seen anything like this before, and it actually was pretty interesting. So check this out. They put giant spools of barbed wire on the back of this thing, or as it's called in the modern day, razor wire, and they just drive the tank along, and it just unspools it from the back and lays it out. So they are able to lay razor wire far quicker than ever before. It is an increase of combat efficiency. And
Also, Paul Beth said, every country song is bitching and whining. It kind of is, but this one was like particularly bad at bitching and whining. Like, I'm not a fan of songs like that personally, and that particular song was like griping about everything. It's like, come on now. It's like, that's not a good song. Like, who would go around and honestly, like, listen, if you like the guy for his other songs, like, I understand that, but that particular song right there was just like negativity galore. It's like, that's not uplifting at all. I don't want to listen to that.
No, all country songs aren't bitching and whining. Most of them are talking about a beer, a pickup truck, and a boat, and some other shit like that. Like that's like all of them are just trying to make you buy stuff now. Like they're like Colbert, a Ford F-150 with 4-wheel drive. You know, it's like they're actually like marketing almost in the songs.
And I actually listen to country, by the way. So I see Hokey Redneck saying, "Why do you hate country?" I like country, but I don't listen to that type of country. Like my type of country is more like easy listening stuff, like Kenny Chesney and things like that. I don't listen to the moaning and groaning ones. Those are off the limits.
I kind of like them, but I like the old ones that would actually like lay out a story, like Ernie Ford's 16 tons. You know that one?
No.
Oh, well, okay. Well, Johnny
I've never heard of
Paychecks,
that one.
take this job and show. I wish I could
I've heard of that
play it.
one.
That one's a good one about, whining and moaning because it's like funny, like it's done like almost like comically. And then there's loads of other country songs. There's a load and load. I mean, country is I guess some of it moves into folk, but country and folk is a very broad kind of a music genre. A lot of them aren't really whining and complaining, and some of them that do it really well, and it's almost it really is storytelling and song. But modern songs, I just can't get behind because it really seems to me like they're just trying to sell, really in every music genre. I'm just not really into modern music. It feels like the music industry has moved to just selling records. It's not about the art of music anymore. And also on top of that, I don't really like how they feel like they're marketing products to you. Like, getting on a boat, you gotta have a boat. If you don't have a boat, you're living in freaking hell. Your wife hates you. It's like, go get a boat. It's like, I don't want a boat. It's like, I don't want to hear about this stupid stuff. And also
The only positive thing about country is when you live in Alabama, the song "Sweet Home Alabama" hits different when you're going down the road.
Oh, dude, Leonard Skinner is a great band. Like, kind of country, kind of not. Great band, though. I think it's a great one. But yeah, that's a good one. Also, let me see here. Yeah,
that's what Ukraine should do. Like, instead of putting all this like Andrew Tate bebop music in these videos, let's try to win over the support of the entire country to support Ukraine. Put some country music in there. That should be the change.
Yeah, that should be. And also, speaking of which, let's look at that razor wire. Are they playing music over this? Oddly enough, they aren't, but we're still going to mute it just to be safe. Also, Defender Marcia said, I can't do country music. Too nasally and twangy. Modern country music really is like that. And when I say like modern, I'm talking about really from like the late 80s on. Like all of it's like that. And also there's no such thing as a different instrument in country anymore rather than a guitar. Like there's just no other instruments that exist in the country realm except for a guitar. I don't really understand that because back in the day, country music used to have all other kinds of cool instruments in the background, and there was actual like differences in the arrangement of instruments. And nowadays it's just guitar, guy singing like this, and keeps on going on and on and on, and he keeps singing about something, and it's something that they're trying to make you going by. It's like, come on, it's like, I don't like it.
That's tough.
It's tough. It's like grating after you hear like 3 of them. And then some people are like, oh, have you heard the new country song? It's like the same as the other 5,000 that have come out in the past 20 years. No, it's like, but anyways, look at this Buhanka. Whoa.
Look at that.
Look at that suffer. Like this thing isn't even a toiler. It's just suffering. They turned it into a pickup.
Yeah, that's not it.
Man, that thing's rough. And I'm not liking it. Basically,
Were they outside of Chernobyl or something in that photo? There was like a freaking like nuclear power plant or something behind them. What was that?
Let me ask you something, Stalker. Have you ever been to the Chernobyl exclusive zone? Hop in my Buhanka and we will take a journey. And then you go
Remember
riding
when the
into...
Russians were snorting the Red Force dirt?
Yeah, when they were digging the trenches. Like, yeah.
They were literally doing lines of the Red Forest like soil.
Dude, they were sitting there after a hard day of digging, and then they come out and go, "Ooh, my lungs feel dusty." And then they like start getting radiation
I
poisoning.
feel warm and fuzzy inside. That's just your love for the country, Bliet.
Man, when I breathe, it doesn't really feel like I'm taking in any oxygen anymore, to be entirely honest. It seems like my bronchioles have been destroyed by radioactive particles, Bliet. But anyways, moving on from that clip and on to the next one, we also got to see the Russian Casualty Report. And whoopee!
Oh, they got one more Bobcat. Look at that. The Bobcat losses are getting a little bit low, but the other ones are increasing, which is, I guess, a good thing. Because I do like Bobcats, but ultimately, the numbers are good. But Enforcer, tell us more.
And Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, told us that troop losses below the 7-day average of 1,579, but January total is 50% of December total and on track for 50,000 losses. Other categories on track to exceed December, but not the highest month of the war. 120 drones is tied in 4th place with August 27th of 2024, and 137 supply trucks is the 6th highest daily loss of the war. And so it's now time for us to get on into the casualty report itself. And we were able to see that 1,480 Russian soldiers and Norks have been wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 20 APCs, 137 supply trucks, 11 main battle tanks, 40 artillery pieces, 120 drones, 31 cruise missiles, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. Just one, but we had to make sure to honorarily throw that in. But moving on from that casualty report, which was unequivocally fire and busing, we must include, we were able to see that within the northern area, the 15th Brigade was hitting and destroying Russian depots within this area. And we can see here that they're giving the usual intro, but now it's time to get down to business. The 15th Brigade don't play that kind of nonsense, and they're about to really show us here in a second.
Man, I love the footage, but the intro is so long.
Man, if only they would cut down that intro. It's not like they've been doing the same intro for 3 years. I mean, if they cut it down a little, maybe it's watchable or something, but Jesus Christ, this intro is just too long.
Video starts at 5 minutes.
That's a top comment every time. Video starts at 13:17. It's like, it's the same every day. It's like, it's the same every day. Oh, man. But they're hitting them. They're really hitting them down there.
Also, I don't know why, but there's a new thing going on in the chat where they'll put a Russian flag equals steak. I'm not sure what that means.
Russia is cooked.
Oh, okay, that's what that means?
I think so, yeah. Like, I'm taking a guess.
I was like, Russia equals steak. I'm like, I'm trying to figure this one out. I'm like, what, they're producing Wagyu now? Is that the new thing?
Premium Russian Wagyu, made out of the finest Chernobyl kettle ever seen. It glows in the dark. Really cool marketing trick. You see, what we do is we irradiate the shit out of it, and it dies from radiation exposure. The meat comes right off the bone. Not from good cooking, but from radiation exposure, blade. But moving on from that and down to Seversk, we also get to see the Russians getting hit down here on the 14th of January. So it's kind of archival, but still modern enough to show. Man, look at that cat. That thing's going wild. That thing isn't even, like, growling. It's going like a hairball or something like that. Like,
oh, man, got a yakking cheetah on the logo.
Man, that thing was about to go, Gah! And then it, like, caught and went, ah! And then that's when they drew it. They were like, perfect. We'll draw it here.
It actually looks like a bobcat, really.
Honestly, it kind of did. It was a bobcat. And, man, look at all these Russians on bikes.
Those damn cyclists.
Man, and the Ukrainians do not like cyclists. Clear the road, they say, and they start clearing. Oh, and they're bringing in artillery. Well, I got to tell you something, folks. If you're trying to cycle through the state of Ukraine, either on a bicycle or a motorcycle, or even a moped, like a Vespa, be careful. The Ukrainians appear to not really like cyclists too much anymore because the Russians have made it uncool. I also like how the Russian Federation is bringing back bicycle battalions, like it's the early eras of World War II, like 1939 and 1940. Like, they're legitimately coming in on dirt bikes. Like, the last time...
Those Razor scooter battalions are even worse.
man, they say that their combat abilities are not razor sharp. And look at that guy. He's like, no, please. And well, I guess there was no exceptions there. We can also see them continuing to drop the bomblets to great effect. And also, let's see, Tika's Makadam said, that's a lynx. I thank you for sharing that because I'm not good with taxonomy, specifically of the feline type. I would be lost. A lion looks like a Libra to me. Well,
Go away.
Go away,
You saw those dirt bikes, man? There was dirt bikes all over the street. I was shocked to see all those dirt bikes.
So many dirt bikes, Bliet. And oh, what's this? Toyota Tacoma. Oh, look at that.
That looked like a Hilux, actually.
They kind of looked like a Hilux.
Wow, so many Hiluxes.
So many Hiluxes, Bliet. And a lot of guys sleeping on the job. I mean, they're just taking naps out there. Kind of crazy. But moving on from that and down to Kormivka, Bliet, we also got to see the Russians getting hit down here. This time by a very interesting brigade. This is called the Shadow Falcon Money Wizard Gang. And this Falcon uses its wing like it's like a vampire holding up a cape, so that way it can swoosh around on the battlefield really mysteriously. But we see them dropping bomblets on the Russian mine-clearing shed down there. We see it continuing to move on. It appears to be unfazed, but the Ukrainians are about to phase it. And we can see that they already hit one of them, and that tank literally started revving through the trees. Look, I think they were like, take it very gently now, very gently. Ooh, bled! And then starts driving like right through the trees.
Turned into a Russian bush hog.
Yeah, Bushmaster or something like that. Oh man, they're clearing them out. Look at them go. They love casting spells. Big credit to the Observer for putting that in my mind to say that right there. But we can see
Wizard Gang. They love casting spells.
This song is brought to you by the Shadow Government or something like that. Oh man, I tell you.
Makes us so defeated after you got finished with that. What was that about?
Man, I was trying to sound like a Russian, man, just completely dejected and hopeless.
Sound like that impression wore you down.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Oh man, I try and do an impression. Oh man, it runs me out of breath. Oh man, but you ought to see my wife. Oh man, she's out of breath after 2 steps. Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh man, we're easing into that one. Oh man, big shout out to Eason, threw in a 50. Oh man, at least he gives us respect around here. Oh man, I'm telling you.
All right,
also, well, the video's over, by the way.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say something there. But moving on from that into the next one, we also got to see the 63rd Brigade knocking out some Russians in the Torskay direction. And I guess you could say that the Russians were torqued up. But we could see them hitting the supply trucks. Boom! Dead on the nail. Oh, and it's cooking and toasting. Like an easy bake oven.
I was going to say that, but I chose not to, but thank you for saying that.
Oh man, I get no respect. I try and come up with something original, and Matthew says it's this 200 times that we said it. Oh man, I'm telling you.
But anyways, oh man.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I can't get no respect on here. I'm trying to look at some footage here, and I hear Rodney in the background. He said, oh, no, is that a tank on fire? No, it's not a tank on fire. That's your breath. Oh my goodness, I get no respect around here.
Oh man, I'm telling you, that looks like a shit show. Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh man, you ought to see my house. Oh man, my kids. They gave me a T-shirt with a target on the back of it for Christmas. Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. And they didn't get a BB rifle for Christmas. They got a 30-06. Oh man, I'm telling you, I'm about to be finished. Oh man.
But anyways, moving on from that and into the next clip, we also get to see them hitting Russian forces here. Also, I just saw Marlene in the live chat say, I can't believe you do a Rodney impression. Yeah, that's like one of the most off-the-shelf ones I've ever done, because who in the world does 80s comedians? You know, like Sam Kinison or Rodney Dangerfield? Like, wait, we can do a Sam Kinison real quick. That just involves screaming. There we go. That's Sam Kinison. So that's the only time we'll do that. Otherwise, we might get a complaint from the neighbors. But we can see them hitting a Russian armored car here and toilet paper flying all abound.
That used to be valuable back in the Whirlybird days, toilet paper.
Man, nowadays, it's just as worthless as toilet paper.
Oh, look, it barely did anything to it.
Oh, look at that. Well, you know, they're very lucky, by the way, because that was actually a Ukrainian armored car. And I forgot to tell you all that. It actually survived. So, funny on that. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the next clip, a little bit further on down the lines and behind the lines, we actually get to see a Russian plane evacuated full of wounded. Those are toes. Don't show that to Weinstein.
Полный борт раненых. Очень много парней.
Man, they got these guys packed in like sardines.
What are they gassing them too? What's that loud racket going on?
That's the sound of the jet engines, Matthew.
Damn, sounded like they were gassing them or something. I was about to say they're giving them that medical treatment deluxe.
Man, they said, just inhale the fumes. Like, it's like, it'll be fine. You'll feel healthier. But anyways, moving on from that, and on into our next clip, we also get to see some Russians getting down in the Volodar direction as we hear brain rot in background. But here's clip.
There's somebody just said the intro's too long. I'm not gonna lie. Don't lie, by the way. Make sure you always stay truthful.
Please make sure to be honest with us. And now we shall ban. I'm just kidding. Like, it's like,
Oh, damn.
some people.
Pulling the Elon.
I'm all into free speech. I don't really like Elon lawsuit. It's like it's okay. It's like, but beyond that, let's see here. Kyle Hayes said, your intro is way too long, not gonna lie. We made it long for a reason. Like, I promise you it is for a reason. Because if it's not that long, it's like, because you know, I'll actually tell you something. Kyle. I'll tell you something. What's interesting about the intro is that at a time it actually used to be 5 minutes long, and we would get into the news, and people would join the stream because, interestingly enough, the large majority of people join 10 minutes into the stream. Even if we get straight to the news immediately, most people are not going to hear what the major breaking headlines of the news were because they're going to join after them. So, with that in mind, we used to have an intro that was 5 minutes long, and by the time most people got onto the stream, we had already moved past the breaking news. And so, people would come on and they'd go, hey, you're clickbait, you're a liar, you aren't even talking about this, I hate this channel, I hate you, you're a little poopy head, I'm leaving. And so then we were like, okay, well, let's make it a little bit longer so that way everyone can get here to get the news. So then that's when the intro became about 10 to 12 minutes long. And it's been that way for 2.5 years now. And then people join and they actually get the news because by the time most people show up on the live stream when it's live, they're there right at the moment that we're going live. And then now our new complaint is, oh, the intro's too long. And if it isn't that the intro's too long, it's that people don't hear the main news story, and then they say we're clickbaiting. So I'd rather have a long a long intro than have a whole bunch of people whining that we're clickbaiting when we're actually covering the news. It's just that they got here late. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that little clip right there, it's time for us to move further down the line and towards Huilopol, which kind of sounds like Stewie trying to say Cool Whip. And speaking of Cool Whip, we got to see some Cool Whip. Look at this. This isn't really a whip, this is an artillery piece, but they still were absolutely slamming the Russians today with some nice artillery. Just look at it. This guy's got an over-under shotgun. He's going to go shooting pigeons. Better hope that Mike Tyson isn't nearby because he's going to smack the shit out of this guy for shooting some pigeons. But moving...
I thought he was a nice guy, but he's really just a rat piece of shit.
I thought you was a nice guy trying to defend Ukraine and everything, but you're just a rat piece of shit killing pigeons like that. You bastard. But moving on from that and out of that clip and on into our next one, we also get to see the Russian Federation getting their D-30s hit down here. And oh, they're turning them nuclear. Everything looks nuclear and infrared and thermal. And that's a D-20 down there.
It's a big gun.
Oh, look, and it's about to disappear. Look at that. It's like the 900,000th time it's happened. Impressive. Like, it's like so cool. And so many people are saying that they love the intro, and I love to see it because usually a lot of people take the intro for granted that like it. No one ever just like goes out of their way to say they love the intro anymore. So usually the only things we hear are the small minority of people who complain about the intro all the time. So they're always like, oh, why is it so long? You know, and something like that. Like, not to make it sound like we don't appreciate those people's comments, but to be entirely honest, I don't, because I know what the alternative is, and then people call us clickbait because they get here late. So, you know.
Well, to be straight up honest, if people just want just the news, like those people typically just watch the short war videos. The people that are here with us every now on the stream, they want the whole Enforcer experience. They want everything, including the news too. So if anybody in the live chat, like for example, that one person we saw a moment ago is like, oh, just get to the news and that's it. That's a short video. We put those out daily.
Yeah, I mean, we get right to the news now. I mean, like, literally, as soon as you click on the video, you're either hearing, hello, everyone, I'm the Enforcer, which probably gets old. It's probably like, welcome back to Finn. But we're going to stop that one there before another community post is made. But then there's also Matthews where he goes, good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt. And you'll hear either of those literally within the first 5 seconds of the video. So if you don't want a long intro, go to the short war videos. But we also got to see the Russians getting hit in Vasilivka today. Check this out. This is filmed by a Russian. And they're like, well, we got like freaking blown up, блядь. Like the literal floors caved in below, блядь. Oh, this guy's going around sounding like if he was speaking English, he'd be like, oh, Billy, he came down on top. This is terrible. He's like, okay, man.
Oh, man. Breaking down in here. Damn, somebody's over there groaning. Must be hot dog man.
No, man, a hot dog man would be under the rubble going, aw, man.
Oh, блядь, what is that man have to make it all sexual?
Aw, man. I took a master class on how to sound like this. Aw, man.
Oh man, it comes naturally this way. Some people have to work at it, some just have it naturally, and I have it. Oh yes, they're here for me.
When I was birthed from my mother's womb, I came out and they tapped me to make sure I was alive, and the first thing I did was start crying, but it didn't sound normal like it sounded like
Oh,
so, moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians with clusters down in the Kherson area. Heavy trap music ensues, and also I like this emblem. It's shark-like because they're Marines. Makes sense. Anyways, they start hitting the Russians with clusters. Enjoy. Like, there you go. This guy's like, please, no. And the Ukrainians are like, nah, never mind. And then they cluster the area anyways. Pretty impressive stuff. Seems to be that they're very successful with those kinds of rounds. We also got to hear right before the stream started that there were explosions in northern Crimea. We'll probably find out more about that tomorrow. 1 second. We don't really have a lot of info on that. It's just, you know, the ambience of northern Crimea. So we'll probably find out more about that tomorrow. So moving on from that and up into Kyiv, we did get one last thing before we get to the speech, which was the air defense report. 34 out of 55 drones were shot down. Another 18 were intercepted due to electronic warfare activity and crash landed in some random field in the middle of Ukraine. So it appears that the Ukrainians were once again able to successfully defend their skies and stop pretty much all, if not every, Russian drone from making it to their target. Moving on from that, it is time for us to finally get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And this one is 3 minutes long, so I guess it's a half long-lasting speech. And so, without further ado, here is the Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Довгий сьогодні день. Візит прем'єр-міністра Британії, підписання 100-річної угоди. Це принципово новий формат відносин. Найбільш близькі відносини зараз між Україною та Британією. І деякі речі, які ми включили в 100-річну угоду з Британією, точно можна робити також з іншими державами, розвиваючи наші партнерства. Більше оборонної взаємодії, більше безпекової. Тільки на цей рік ми маємо від Британії обсяг саме військової допомоги 6,6 мільярдів доларів. З них більше 3 – це буде щорічний обсяг підтримки обов'язковий, і це стільки, скільки буде потрібно. Довгостроково. Окрім цього, в угоді передбачена взаємодія і економічна, і технологічна, і освітня, розвиток наших шкіл та університетів разом з британськими. Є також і закрита, таємна частина угоди. Все те, що дійсно нам додає стійкості, можливостей розвиватися. Сьогодні ж разом з прем'єр-міністром Британії ми зустрілися з виробниками українських дронів. Це саме та зброя, яку зараз виробляють в Україні, і найвигідніше виробляти саме тут, ніж будь-де в Європі. Ми постійно робимо наші дрони більш ефективними. Буде більше інвестицій і від партнерів у виробництво українських дронів. Цей рік має бути рекордним за обсягами наших дронів. Була також зустріч з міністром оборони Італії. Я вдячний Італії за всю надану підтримку нашій державі, нашим людям. Ми говорили про те, що можемо надалі робити разом передусім. Це ППО, а також спільне виробництво. Треба додавати робочих місць нашим народам в Європі і технологічних результатів. І Італія готує 11-й пакет підтримки. Також зустріч була з міністром закордонних справ Нідерландів. Нідерланди – один із найбільш принципових наших партнерів в усіх питаннях ЄС для України, НАТО, також відповідальність Росії, російського керівництва за цю війну. Обов'язково це буде. Ми знайдемо формат. Ще одне. Зустрівся з представниками ООН. Головне питання було сьогодні – підтримка українців, передусім внутрішніх переселенців, відновлення зруйнованих будинків, соціальна підтримка фінансова. На цей рік в рамках програм ООН передбачено загалом 3,3 мільярдів доларів на підтримку українців. Ми обговорили сьогодні, як зробити допомогу ООН більш ефективною і як наблизити найбільш бажане для нас, а це справедливий мир. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
Arem
Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 1058 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And that is moving us on into the second segment of this stream. A little bit overtime, as a matter of fact. It's actually almost 11 o'clock on the dot. That reminds me of a song, Matt. Do you remember? It's 9 o'clock on the dot. I need a, on the clock. I need a crack rock on the spot. And then they just close the door on them.
Damn.
You remember
I've never
that?
heard that one.
Dude,
No, I've never heard that.
Okay, so I'll explain that now that you don't know the context. Now I have to explain it. So someone moved into pretty much the hood in some American city, and the house that they moved into was the trap house, but they moved into it so it wasn't anymore. So someone showed up there to, you know, get their fix, and they like sung this whole song at their door, and then they just closed the door in their face, and then the video ended, and that was like the song that they sang.
I've never heard of that story.
I wish I could show it to you. I don't know if it would be like a copyright kind of a thing.
Wow, I'm
because
just sketched out to show that on the stream, man. That sounds
Man.
crazy.
it was kind of crazy. I'm not going to lie. But anyways, it's almost 11 o'clock. Oh, it's now 11 o'clock on the dot, interestingly enough. But still, the news was pretty lengthy. And I was absolutely talking like a fiend. I was talking about as fast as I could to try and knock all of it out. But we had huge news tonight. But even more impressively, we had a huge amount of people here tonight. We had 10.2 thousand people here at the peak tonight. And about 55,000 people have watched so far. And all I've got to ask is, are y'all enjoying it so far? Are y'all entertained? I hope y'all are, because we're about to be moving on into the segment where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. It is a wildly fun segment, because we can talk about anything. I mean, we can literally talk about literally anything and everything y'all want to talk about, except for politics and religion. Those are largely the two things that we do not talk about. But beyond that, I cannot wait to be able to get into what each and every single one of y'all want to talk about, what y'all's topics are, and hopefully we'll be able to get not only a lot of super chats tonight, but a lot of live chats as well. And so with that, Matthew, tell me, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, the most highly anticipated part of the stream every single night that we run it. We have a poll to address for the last one, and it says, at this point, how much longer do you think the Ukraine-Russia war will last? 44% said a few more months, while 35% said a few more years, and 6% said it's about to end in 3 days. Ha ha ha. It's not going to be ending in 3 days. Just a little bit of a spoiler alert. It will not be ending in 3 days. That's been admitted to by pretty much everybody at this point, and that is now out of the window. Realistically speaking, I'm with the 35%. I think this thing has a few more years on it, because even if the Russian economy starts coming to its knees in the coming months, it's not going to be an overnight thing for the Russian economy just to collapse. It is going to take some time, and this war will drag out for a few more years. And also, negotiations are probably not going anywhere either, so I would say that's not going to end it either. And also, by the way, I just want you to recall this. About 2 years ago, people were saying on these polls, I've been running these polls consistently for years now, this exact question right here. People were saying 2 years ago, this is going to last a few more months. And here we are 2 years later. So I think the war has a few more years on it, and it's probably going to be that way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would expect that the war is probably going to go on a few more years, most likely. I would assume at least 1 or 2, because it just seems to me that the war is probably not going to be reaching an end. And the only way it would be able to end fairly soon is if there was some sort of a peace negotiation that was reached. And I do not believe that that's going to be reached immediately, so that means it'll probably be years from now. So that would be my general consensus as well. I would have to agree with the 34%, probably a few more years. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next segment, the one where we actually get to talk to each and every single one of y'all and cross the threshold that exists in between us and y'all here on the internet and talk to y'all as though y'all are right in front of us. And so, with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping right back into our super chat segment here, this one is going to go to Corsair F4U, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Corsair, for that support and helping to keep us running. And Corsair said, Pizza Partey. Have y'all checked out this Napoleon Collins? He rammed a Confederate merchant raider inside a Brazilian harbor and said that it was for the good of the country and LSA.
And I thank you so much for the support. I actually have not heard of that story, but interestingly enough, a lot of the naval battles that happened in the Civil War, oddly enough, happened around South America. It's bizarre why that was the case, because the Union had a blockade going on around the Confederacy practically all the time, and somehow most of the actual naval battles of the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War that is, happened all the way down around South America. Hell, one of them happened around the Falkland Islands, interestingly enough, which is about as far away from the United States as you can get, north to south-wise. But beyond that, I have not actually heard that story, but I do thank you so much for supporting this channel and sharing that story with us, F4U Corsair, and I'm actually going to look into that in a second and show you all something fairly cool as well. But before we move on to that, I got to thank you for supporting a pizza party. I actually have been enjoying a good amount of pizza lately. Matthew and me have been. And we've been cooking it up Enforcer's way. We've been getting stuffed crust pizzas with pepperoni, bacon, and sausage on top. It truly is a divine combination, stuffed crust and that all together. And I've just been enjoying it. I don't know about you, Matthew, but that's honestly my favorite kind of pizza these days.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like it. The stuffed crust, I can only have it a couple of times, though, because even though it's good, the first couple of times you eat it, it starts really tasting like kind of fake cheese after a while, and it's kind of like gets a little bit old, but to me at least. But it's pretty good the first couple of times.
Fake cheese? Man, we be getting that cheese like we're from Vermont. There ain't nothing fake about it. Like, it's like, what are you talking about?
Man.
Man, I'm telling you, I think it tastes real. I think it's real to me. Dude, that just, man, there's a lot of jokes to be made about the way I said that. But anyways, moving on from that, I do have to say thank you so much for the support, F4U Corsair. And also, really quickly, let me grab your super chat and look into the name that you mentioned. Napoleon Collins. Most likely named after Napoleon. I would assume. Napoleon Bonaparte, that is. So let's see. Napoleon Collins. A commander in the U.S. Navy, interestingly enough. Look at this. This guy looked like he had balls. But let's see what he did. Let's see. He was born in Pennsylvania. That says much. He became a midshipman, and a lot of people from Pennsylvania will be like, what do you mean by that? I mean nothing. I was just saying that to say it. But let's see here. He took an active role in the war with Mexico. That's also called the Mexican-American War. Let's see. During the first years of the Civil War, he commanded several gunboats and attained the rank of commander in July of 1862. He was also in command of a screw sloop, which is a sloop that screws, called the Wachusett, and he took it into a neutral harbor and captured the Confederate cruiser, the CSS Florida, sparking a minor diplomatic crisis between the United States and the Empire of Brazil, which I believe at that point was led by Pedro II, if I'm not mistaken. Might be wrong on that. I think Pedro II was from later on. But anyways, Florida was ultimately towed to sea and taken to the United States. Court-martialed for this illegal undertaking, Collins was sentenced to be dismissed. Since the seizure of Florida was both militarily effective and popularly acclaimed in northern states, the sentence was not carried out. He remained in active service in the post-war Navy, reaching the rank of captain by 1866 and rear admiral by 1874. In 1875, while in command of the South Pacific Squadron, he died at Lima, Peru. A fairly interesting life for this guy. It's actually very shortly summarized here as well, not much written on him. But beyond that, there is another ship of interest from the Confederacy called the CSS Alabama, which is one that actually has a painting about it, and it looked like a pretty nice ship, I'm not going to lie. Like, you know, you look at that, it's like, wow, that's actually a pretty stylish-looking little thing right there. It got destroyed. It sank. Let's see here. Fate sunk in 1864. 160 years ago, mind you. And let's see here. Oh yeah, this one was just outside of Cherbourg, France, and got obliterated by the Kearsarge. So, kind of interesting how that happened. All the way over near Cherbourg, France. So let me show you all that really quickly. We got to make sure to remind folks where all of this is. So let me go find Cherbourg. Are you kidding me? Am I blind? There it is. Cherbourg, right here. This is the port of Cherbourg. So the CSS Alabama was leaving the port of Cherbourg in France in the middle of the English Channel, and then the Kearsarge just rolls up and obliterates it in the middle of the English Channel. So it's a little wild when you think about it, where some of these naval battles happened in the U.S. Civil War, because some of them happened in Brazil. You know, ships are just literally being seized out of Brazilian ports. The CSS Alabama gets obliterated right outside of France. Like, it's a little wild how all of the naval battles of the Civil War happened everywhere for the large part, but the United States. I think the only one I can think of any, well, the only two I can think of is the CSS Hunley, which was the first submarine ever successfully used in combat, taking out, I think it was the Kearsarge, if I'm correct, and then the Battle of Hampton Roads, in between the CSS Virginia and the USS Monitor. I think those are the only major battles I can think of in the U.S. Civil War that happened on the U.S. coastline. Beyond that, pretty much every other naval battle beyond an amphibious landing happened literally elsewhere in the world but North America, which is always the weirdest thing about that. But still, I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us, F4U Corsair, and I hope I was able to add a little bit more intrigue to U.S. Civil War naval battles, because in my honest opinion, they make no sense. But honestly, naval battles never make sense because, like, for example, in World War I, there was a German ship that was sunk near the Falklands as well in the middle of World War I by a British cruiser. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, one of the folks who watches this channel said, "I'm from Pennsylvania, punk," and then put an LOL behind it. They sent that over text. Yeah, I was sitting there, I was like, yeah, I can't really diss on Pennsylvania. It's actually a pretty cool state. Like, for example, one cool thing to throw in about the state of Pennsylvania, since I, like, dissed on y'all for no reason and then backed off of it immediately, and now I'm being threatened over text. Oh my god! Like, one thing that's really cool about the state of Pennsylvania is that this is actually the birthplace of the industrialized United States. It was actually in Pittsburgh where that began, which is a little crazy because Pittsburgh's now like an unmitigated hellhole. But back in the day, it actually was the industrial center of the United States. And also, I just heard from Matthew that we, crazily enough, have breaking news. So what do we have, Matthew?
All right, so we all know that we're still tracking, and sort of in the background at this point, the major fires happening in Los Angeles. It looks like California is suffering a different type of fire crisis right now. It looks like this one is actually going to be in Moss Landing, California, at a power plant. And apparently they have some sort of batteries here at this power plant or something like that. And it looks like they've issued evacuation orders for Moss Landing, California, some places of it, due to this major fire. I've reposted the video, Enforcer. It looks like the fire is getting major, and it looks like it's spewing toxic fumes everywhere, and it's becoming a pretty big crisis here. It looks like this place is actually south of San Jose in California, so south of San Francisco, and it looks like it's a pretty serious deal as well, so it's causing some evacuation alerts to be triggered.
I wonder how that happened.
And also, apparently, these fires right here, these lithium fires, are very hard to put out, so this thing's probably going to burn until it burns the whole place down. And unless they have some method I'm not familiar with, then they're probably not going to be putting it out.
From what I've heard, the lithium fires are practically impossible to put out, even on the scale of a Tesla car, much less massive lithium batteries at a power plant. Those are probably going to be impossible to put out. So I would assume that they're just going to have to let this fire burn. I don't know what would have happened here for this to happen. Where in the world is this? Hang on, I want to go find this. Let's see.
It's south of San Jose, right on the coast.
Right on the coast. So we wouldn't have passed it on the train.
There it is, right there on Google. It's Moss Landing structure fire, right there on Google.
Oh, look. It's right here. Look, and that's the power plant right there. Look at that. So, let's see, where in the world?
I'm seeing reports that this place actually has some of the like large battery packs, like the Tesla mega packs. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I'm seeing some reports about that. That could be what's on fire.
Yeah, it looks like they have some massive battery structures around that allow them to store power. A lot of them, as a matter of fact. Let's pull them up. Because maybe we can... Moss Landing Power Plant. Let's go take a look.
They're currently telling the civilians in the area, they're telling them to close the windows and doors, shut off your air systems, and stay out of the area. So apparently this smoke is extremely toxic, so you don't want to breathe that in.
So this is a natural gas plant. And let's see. Its large stacks are landmarks, much like any power plant. The Ernest C. Gaston power plant in central Alabama is a landmark, kind of for the same reason. But let's see here. It's let's see. It was once the largest power plant in the state of California, but 2 large supercritical steam units were retired in 2016, so it doesn't produce hardly as much power as it used to. But anyways, let's see here. Let's see. We want to find when the batteries were installed. let's see, announced that it may close
Apparently this is the second battery malfunction in less than 6 months reported at the Moss Landing power plant, according to the reports I'm seeing here from KSBW8 Action News, apparently a local news station. So it's not the first time they've had an issue with this particular place. I'm trying to see here who makes the batteries. Is it really a Tesla battery or mega pack, or is that something that people are just saying?
Let's see. Utilities in California are required by a 2013 law to provide significant battery storage by 2024, which actually was last year. So let's see. So they have the Vistra 500 kilovolt and the Elkhorn 115 kilovolt battery storage units at this power plant. Let's see here. What are these
Oh,
batteries?
there it is. It says Elkhorn 115 kilovolt. It says to be provided by Tesla. This is according to Wikipedia. And it says operated by PG&E, which I believe is
Pacific Gas and Electric.
Yeah, so there's one by Tesla, I think, at least according to the article. But it looks like maybe the first one is not.
Let's see here. This would be, so actually, Vistra will be the largest lithium-ion battery energy storage system in the entire world. And let's see here. So according to what we're reading right here, Vistra 500 kilovolt is operational right now to full scale. So that's very interesting to hear. But it doesn't appear. Let's take a look at this down here. On 2000. And to be complete by 2021. So this article has not been updated in a while because it's saying and be complete by 2021. It's 2025 now, so it's well beyond complete. So let's see. And it was inaugurated in June of 2022. Do we know which battery packs are on fire? Is it Vistra or Elkhorn? Because Elkhorn appears to be entirely Tesla battery packs. Vistra doesn't have a specified battery supplier, from what I can tell.
So I'm checking here to see if I can find information about it. Let's see here. So let me go back and check. There was a article posted 3 minutes ago that should have some more information. So let's see. Let's see here. Also, I'm surprised this isn't really getting much national attention right now. It seems to be sort of like limited to the California area. But I'm not seeing here if it states which one. Let's see. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. So they did mention in one of these articles about the Tesla batteries being installed at the plant, but they're not saying whether or not that is the specific pack on fire or not, if I can speak correctly. But so I'm not really clear at the moment.
So interestingly enough, here's something that's very interesting here. The Vistras are actually provided by LG. The Elkhorns are provided by Tesla. So depending on which one's on fire, either Elkhorn or Vistra, which I believe Vistra is this massive battery pack facility over here, that will tell us a good deal about what's going on. It looks, interestingly enough, the actual fire icon is near to the Elkhorn batteries, but we can actually use some geolocation here to figure out a little bit more about where this is. So let me go back to Twitter. Well, for some
Also,
reason,
Enforcer, I'm shocked. I'm shocked it's caught on fire because I've been like hearing for a long time that these battery packs are extremely safe. Like they have a very good track record and they're very stable. So for that to catch on fire, that does raise some questions about how that did start.
so let's see here. So this is the exact viewpoint that they have here. We can see the same tree right there. We can see the little guard post right there in the middle. We can see the gate. We can actually see the same little red barrier right there as well. This is a very recent Google Street View that they have. So this is the exact same spot of the power plant, and here's the massive funnel, one of the funnels, and there's a second one, I believe, behind it. But anyways, we now know exactly the viewpoint that they were looking at when the fire happened. So let's zoom out. So it's directly in the Elkhorn battery complex. So that's the Tesla-provided battery packs that are on fire right now, not the LG-provided ones that are further down on the facility towards the southeastern side.
Interesting. And also, I was checking here. Let's see here. On Tesla's website, it says the Mega Pack is one of the safest battery storage products of its kind. Units undergo extensive fire testing, include integrated safety systems, specialized monitoring software, and 24/7 support. And it reiterates that it's the safest of its kind. So, you know, honestly, I would tend to think right off the bat that the batteries itself, because I'm not really sure how this would just randomly spark at random like this unless something caused it. And, you know, unless somebody's mismanaging the place, which we don't know if that's true or not, then I wonder if this was intentional by some way or another. Of course, we don't know that right now, but I just wonder how it got started.
Let's see. Are there any words of incidents that have happened at this power plant in the past?
Well, 6 months ago, there was an article about something else happening. Let me go get that link and I'll show you.
Let's see here. At this power plant or a different one?
No, it was at this one. It was another battery malfunction less than 6 months ago. Let me grab this article, and we're gonna put it on Discord and send it over. There it is.
So let's see here. Let's take a look.
It says this was dated February the 14th. Let's see here. Wait a minute, this says February the 14th, 2022. This isn't less than 6 months ago. That article title is not accurate right there. This is back in 2022.
So apparently there was already battery incidents going on there, but let's see. When they arrived, so there was another battery meltdown. This is the second one in 2022. So there was already one that happened 6 months prior to this. This is another article written at the beginning of 2022, right at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, oddly enough. Well, actually, yeah, that would be correct. So apparently when they arrived, 10 battery racks had just completely melted and were destroyed in some other additional fire. And let's see. One concern is the plant is going to get bigger. Let's see. The energy storage facilities owned and operated by Vistra. So, interestingly enough, these batteries were actually provided by LG in this specific story at the Vistra complex in the southeast that had caught on fire and been destroyed. The Tesla one was just coming online at this point, and now it appears that they're also having major fires with those lithium battery packs in the northern area. So, while for a second there it looked like Tesla may have not had a good product, it appears that LG has had the exact same issues with the Vistra storage facility to the southeast of the power plant in the past, a couple of times, as a matter of fact, while it's been operational. So
I'm seeing tons of articles here in Forrester about how safe these battery packs are, and I've heard from people that are supposedly experts on YouTube that speak about this. I'm not saying like YouTube experts. I mean like battery experts on YouTube that have YouTube channels. They say that these things are very safe, and I don't see any reason to believe that that's not the case, because unless somebody's doing something crazy to the batteries, like charging them up beyond their capacity or something like that, if that's even possible, then I don't know why it would catch on fire.
I'd have to be honest with you. I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to have to call a cap on them being extremely safe, because in the course of 6 months, 2 major incidents to happen where multiple major packs. I mean, these packs are not small. Like this is a truck. This is a Super Duty truck right there next to one of these packs. I mean, these things are the size of container boxes. These batteries are. These things are huge. And for 10 of them to have gone up in one instance, which I guess would have been, let's see, that's 7 of them right here, 8, 9, 10. So that would have been this whole area of the facility here. For 10 of them to have gone up, and that was just a small, mention in February of 2022, that is telling me that they're not really safe, because it's not often, like, for example, in a normal power plant under a normal load, like this gas power plant, it's not normal for them to just have a boiler explosion or anything along those lines. Usually boiler explosions make national news when they happen. So I would say that relative to the normal power production that is, happening on the grid, in the power plant actually producing the electricity, these things sound like they generally are unsafe. I mean, probably Tesla batteries may be the safest relative to other unsafe batteries, but to me, it sounds as though these things are having some serious issues, because this couldn't be an act of sabotage. For this to have happened multiple times in the past now, this sounds like the lithium battery technology in this kind of scale just hasn't been researched enough. Well, not really researched enough, but fleshed out enough to truly be considered safe and a viable option to store electricity long term, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, maybe so. And also it says apparently it's 182 megawatts here at this place. So that's quite a lot of energy being stored in these batteries. I wonder, I don't know if the whole thing's going to burn down or not. It looks like, according to the reports, it looks like the firefighters are on scene trying to put it out. They're not giving an update as to whether or not that's successful or not. But if the whole thing were to burn down and put these toxic lithium fumes into the air like that, because apparently the fumes are extremely toxic, according to what we're seeing here, what type of effect is that going to have, and how far is that going to contaminate? Like, how far is that lithium going to float?
I don't really know. It could be as far as the winds carry it. So if the wind's strong, it could carry it a pretty considerable distance in any direction. But I wouldn't really know particularly right now, because that would have to do with particle density, the heat, the atmosphere, the humidity, the winds, all that kind of stuff to figure out how far it would be carried. But I would assume at least several miles at a minimum.
Yeah, in other words, like, with these evacuation zones popping up, it sounds like there's about 1,200 people in the evacuation zones right now. Obviously, this is not as disastrous as a nuclear power plant going up. That'd be much worse. But it sounds like this is like a much lesser version, but still a very critical type of situation here where it can contaminate a large area. And hopefully it doesn't carry it all the way up to like San Jose because it's actually not that far away. How many miles is it from San Jose? Because that's actually a populated area right above it.
Let's see. Let's take a little measure. We're going to bam right there. And boom. So San Jose is about 35 miles away.
Interesting. So that wouldn't be. I won't say it for a fact because I don't know, but maybe it could carry it that far. But I don't know which way the winds are blowing either. It could blow it out to the sea or the ocean.
It could possibly. Man, I swear that the train passed by. You know what? It did actually, didn't it? Yeah, the Coast Starlight. Yeah, we actually rode a train past this power plant, most likely, but it was late at. You know what? It's crazy, man. The train tracks literally went right by it. So at some point we went and passed this power plant, but it was late at night and the sun had gone down, so we didn't see it. But the train passed right by it.
Well, that's crazy. I'm glad it didn't have this issue when we were going by it.
Yeah, I know, right? Like that would have been unfortunate. It's just I got to be honest with you, Matthew. I know you didn't really like the train a lot, but isn't it cool to say that we were physically on the ground, practically near to everything that has been happening in California recently? I mean, like we were in North LA. We rode the train all the way through Northern LA. We rode it past this power plant. I mean, like literally anywhere and everywhere. It's like, oh, we've like actually been there before. We passed by it on the train.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It's kind of like saying we drove through Chernobyl or something like that before that went down. So I guess.
It's kind of cool. But beyond that, moving on from the whole cool point, I would say that this is starting to show to me, because like I'll be honest here. Let's just be honest. Who said that the battery is extremely safe, Matthew? Who was the spokesperson who said this battery is the safest battery on Earth? Period. Who was that?
Well, I've just heard it from generally like battery like experts and engineers. I've heard that being said. Obviously, Tesla's going to claim that because they're selling the battery, so they're going to be a little bit biased. But there's nothing out there that's been disproving Tesla's claim that they're safe. It looks to be like all the engineers claim that are not in Tesla. They also claim that they're safe. So I don't know. Like I don't know what would cause this. That's why I'm a little bit suspicious about this, especially with the other fires happening in LA and also the weird things happening around the country with sort of like malicious attacks. I just wonder if this is something related to it because I don't even understand how this would catch on a fire this big.
I would doubt it. Usually, energy facilities have a pretty decent amount of security around them, where it'd be fairly difficult to get in there and do something like this. Uh, even gas power plants like this have a pretty decent amount of security. I mean, they have razor wire and chain link. That would be enough to generally dissuade most people from doing anything like this. So I would generally say, and especially considering that this has happened in the past for years now, this couldn't be this one probably is not sabotage. This is probably a battery overheated or failed and then just exploded. Because a lot of people may remember back in the day, this is something to remind people about lithium battery storage. Lithium batteries are not allowed on airplanes at all. Like if you're flying commercial, cannot take a lithium battery on a plane because there is a chance that it could just end up overheating due to a pressure difference and explode inside of the hull. So that is something that is not accepted because if it blasted through the side of the fuselage, that's going to cause a rapid decompression, which could cause structural damage and a major emergency. Another thing about lithium batteries is that generally they tell you don't leave them charging overnight. They could explode. There's a lot of things that can lead to a lithium ion battery of any type exploding. So knowing that generally just average commercial batteries are incredibly volatile of the lithium ion variety, it would generally be safe to say that the main underlier of the unsafeness of the battery is the lithium ion inside of it. Now, that might be different for these batteries, of course, saying that a commercial battery is the same as an industrial grade battery of a container size is, of course, a far stretch. But at the same time, considering that there's been multiple incidents over years of just dozens of these things catching on fire and burning, to me, it's seeming as though this technology is unproven at the moment, and there has not been enough research into trying to make lithium ion batteries safe and not prone to exploding and burning. Or it may just be that lithium ion is too unstable of a source for a battery pack, and maybe they need to go with something else like molten sodium or something along those lines, because I have heard that they are looking into trying to use molten sodium as a form of a battery pack or storage, but I don't believe that technology is that far along at this point. I think it's more in like the very early prototypical phases. So this might be the best thing available for the technology at the time, but it sounds as though it's generally unsafe to me, at least in my opinion, and requires more
So
research.
So here's what I'm seeing right here. It says this is a Megapack enhanced safety overview according to board docs. It says in the unlikely event of a fire with the Tesla Megapack, rigorous full-scale fire testing has shown that the Megapack performs in a safe and controlled manner, consuming itself slowly without explosive bursts, projectiles, or unexpected hazards, and also without propagating to neighboring Megapack units. So if one catches on fire, the theory is, according to the report here, is that it should stay relatively isolated to that one Megapack unit and not spread to the other ones. At least that's the report. But based on the size of that fire, though, that looked like a very large fire. Like I'd be shocked if that was just one Megapack. Because it looked massive to me based on that video we just saw. But also, I came across another article here from September 2023, and it claims in the article that there was another fire involving these large-scale lithium-ion batteries in Australia, and it looks like a similar situation happened. They told residents to stay indoors and avoid the smoke, and it looks like it was another Megapack unit that might have gone up. It was nicknamed Big Bessie, according to the article. It was in Australia. And it looks like it had a similar situation to it. So it doesn't state here exactly what the cause of the fire was either in this article. Looks like the fire was treated as non-suspicious, and that was pretty much the end of it. So I don't really know, but it sounds like it's not the first time this has happened at this specific plant here in California, and it sounds like it's happened elsewhere around the world as well.
And that just shouldn't normally be happening. I mean, electrical fires and stuff like that do happen, but it isn't to the point that you're having to tell people, stay indoors, don't inhale anything from outside, turn off the air conditioners, kind of a deal. This is something that I believe may end up being unsafe for the public, and there should be more research put into safety of these batteries, because notice how they said this, man. They said, oh, the batteries are extremely safe. They burn in a very controlled way. They didn't say that they, wouldn't combust at random moments. They just said, well, it burns very controlled when it does catch on fire. Like, if that's to say, like that's like saying, oh, well, this car is really safe. When it explodes really small. Like, it's like, well, that doesn't really sound safe. I mean, we're classifying the safety of the battery as when it does catch on fire, it isn't like, blowing up like a bomb. It's just kind of like, a giant bonfire. It's like, well, that doesn't really sound safe anyways, because, like, should it really be catching on fire at all? I mean, it's not to say that it's supposed to be 100% foolproof, but at the same time, when the safety rating is being classified after it catches on fire, I don't really think that's a good kind of a safety assessment. It should be, is this thing ever really going to catch on fire often? And the answer to that ought to be no. And it sounds as though these things are catching on fire quite a good deal. Now, I'm not against battery storage. Go ahead.
Oh, no, finish. I thought you were finished.
I'm not against battery storage, just to make that clear for everyone. It is a neat idea to actually have just, stored power available for the grid, but also, by the way, I forgot to mention to y'all the reason why that's the case. Because California is one of the few states that actually relies heavily on solar and wind power, they have to be able to produce electricity when electricity isn't being made. Solar panels and wind turbines are greatly affected by wind conditions and pretty much the amount of sunlight that the photovoltaic cells that make up a solar panel are able to receive. So on overcast days or days that don't really have a lot of wind, California is not producing enough power for their entire grid. So for this reason, on days that energy consumption is low, these power plants, like the gas power plants here, have to be operating at pretty much 100% production to fill these batteries with electricity to be stored, so that way if an overcast day comes, or if a less than windy day arrives, they can just start to turn on these batteries and allow the grid to pretty much suckle off of them until the prevailing sunlight conditions or wind conditions return for them to be able to use wind and solar. That's generally the reason why the state of California started to pass laws back in the day to create these battery storage facilities, is so that way they can make sure to accommodate the grid when it's not producing enough electricity. So that's largely the reason why these are here. You wouldn't really need these if the grid was just running off of, say, nuclear power, to where nuclear power could ramp up production and lower production as needed, instead of having to actually store the electricity and then wait for a literal rainy day to then have to use the battery energy. So that's a little interesting to me.
Also, I did have some more information here. I pulled up a CNBC article, actually back from 2022 when the last incident happened here at this power plant right here involving these battery packs. It looks like the first two instances were overheating, but it was not the Tesla mega packs that overheated. It was apparently the other ones that overheated, and that appears to be what caused it. Was they simply got too hot, and it caused maybe, well, according to what I'm reading here, one of them to combust. At least that's my initial glance at the article. That appears to be what it is. Also, let's see here. I was looking here. It looks like, let me go find the other thing I was going to point out here. Let's see. So they were concerned about two different chemicals getting into the air. The very toxic constituents like hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid as well. So not stuff you want to breathe in when these battery packs burn. It looks like the last time that one of these battery packs caught on fire, the fire department tried to put out the initial mega pack. They let that one burn out actually, and then they followed the protocols that Tesla instituted to actually prevent the other ones from catching on fire, which appeared to have worked. And that was pretty much all there was in the article. But it sounds like they've had other issues before, and they also cited the issue with the Tesla Megapacks in Australia with a similar incident. So it's not really clear what's causing it with the Tesla Megapacks, but it looks like this is certainly not the first time it's happened.
Also, really quickly, I see someone who's adamantly saying that I'm wrong, and I want to address this really quickly. Someone said, no, you're wrong. The electricity company buys power when it's cheap and stores it in the batteries and then sells it back when it's more expensive. That's not true. This is run by Pacific Gas and Electric. This is a state-run, largely utility in the state of California. They don't scalp. Like, the price of electricity is largely set. Like, it's a utility. It's not something where they go, okay, it looks like the price of, it's not like oil where you go, okay, the price of oil has gone up, let's sell more oil. What they're doing, and you can find this just with a simple Google search, is that it's storing electricity to help wane them off of fossil fuels, meaning that this is a response to them using more renewable energy, and renewable energy sources like solar and wind power are not able to be ramped up to meet the demands of the grid, so you kind of just have to be able to literally store energy for a rainy day. There's no such thing as Pacific Gas and Electric going, okay, the price has gone up, let's scalp them, put the electricity out there. Like, that's not how the energy grid works at all. The energy grid doesn't work like the oil industry or the coal industry, where the price of coal and oil can fluctuate. The price of electricity is largely fixed by the government, state government or federal government, and is provided to the public as a utility. So your electricity usage can go up and your electricity bill can go up as a result of that, but the price of electricity generally isn't going to be fluctuating day by day like a stock or something along those lines. So that's what the batteries are for, and a simple Google search would prove that that is the case. So once again...
And also, by the way, I just want to say a disclaimer real quick, because I've glanced at these articles and I'm saying things based on what I'm reading, glancing at it. Take everything I said with a grain of salt about these articles, and also the megapack issues and things like that. I'm not an expert in these systems, obviously. I'm trying to educate myself as I read through here. So some of the things I said might be incorrect. So take it with a grain of salt. I just want to say that, just so that way I'm not, saying things that are untrue about things like that. Don't want to, slander anybody. So just want to make sure y'all understand that. This is based on what I'm reading in the articles, and I might be misunderstanding things.
And also, really quickly, I would also like to add one more thing. I still think that nuclear power is the way to go, because if this is what this is for, and pulling it up on Google, you can easily find that this is the state of California's ambition, is to be able to work away from fossil fuels and move into largely renewable energy as a whole. They still have to have, though, a natural gas power plant to be able to build up enough electricity to store in these batteries, so that way when the grid isn't producing, they can then start to feed these batteries into the grid. This is something that I think is not a great idea. I believe that nuclear power is the future. It is a clean energy source. Don't listen to people who say it's not. It is incredibly clean. It defeats fossil fuels. It defeats coal and oil, meaning that we don't have to have any sort of a crippling dependence on a resource that may or may not be available in the future, and we may have to try and deal with foreign countries that may begin to have a stranglehold on our economy because of a fossil fuel resource. Strategically, nuclear is the best option. Whether it be fusion or fission, it still is, in my opinion, the best. And if I was the president, I would largely be pushing for nuclear power instead of wind or solar or anything else for that matter. That would largely be my opinion. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, but we have to make sure to get back to the questions because we still have so many more of them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to Hokey Redneck, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support and helping to keep us running. And Hokey said,
Hey!
when Russia pushes Ukraine forces back to their borders, will Russia keep their momentum going?
Ukraine will probably not push Russia back to their borders, unfortunately. Hate to say that. But if they did, the Russian Federation would most likely give up, because at that point I would assume that the economy is completely collapsed behind them, and there's really no way. I mean, hell, they would have been beaten so badly on the battlefield, I don't think the Russian army would be able to recover in that kind of a hypothetical scenario. So I would think that they probably would not. But still, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Eason, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Eason, for that $50 support and helping to keep us running. And I'll just double checking real quick. Eason did not leave a comment, but they left a super sticker. And thank you very much, Eason, for that support once again and helping to keep the lights on. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, Eason, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here, right now. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, let me double check something real quick. Let me see if I got somebody's mixed up with Hokey. So Hokey said that was not my question. So let's see here. Let's see. That was not Hokey's question. I don't know what happened with that. I must have pressed the paste button on the wrong one. Sorry about that, Hokey. Let's go back and revisit Hokey's $50 super chat. He said, Google the Radford ammunition plant explosions and was at my college for one of them.
And can you tell me how to spell that again real quick?
Let's see. It is, hold on. Radford ammunition plant explosions.
Radford ammunition plant explosion. Let's see. So, dang, there's been a lot of explosions at this place. One in 1978, one in 1985, one in 2018. A load, like, interestingly enough. Let's see. This is in Montgomery County in Virginia, and they produce propellants and explosives in support of field artillery, air defense, tank, missile, aircraft, and naval weapon systems. So they produce pretty much the gamut of ammunition. But let's see here. History. From 1970 to 1985, there were 9 major explosions that caused multiple deaths and millions in damage. Notably, an explosion equivalent to 8,600 pounds of TNT destroyed the plant's TNT manufacturing facility and injured 100 workers in 1974. And a 5,000-pound nitroglycerin explosion in 1985 killed 2 employees and left a half-acre crater. So it appears that not only are they selling ammunition to the U.S. military, but they're also testing it on site, which is pretty wild to hear, because I've never heard of this plant before, and it's literally just blowing up just about every day, which is wild. But still, I gotta thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I didn't even know about this, and this is very interesting to hear. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, before we move on to the next one, I saw some people saying nuclear is not clean. Solar and wind are clean. They aren't clean. Let me ask you all this. Wind turbine is made, and solar panels as well, are made out of a decent amount of steel, aren't they? The answer to that's a yes. So, if we are to make a wind turbine, or specifically steel to make it out of, what do we use to make steel? We use coal and iron. And we use a lot of coal. And specifically, we bake the coal to turn it into coke, and then we cook the coke with the oil, and that's what largely turns it into steel. So with that in mind, is it really clean? Because we have to use an exorbitant amount of coal to pretty much cook with the iron or melt them together to create steel, because the carbon strengthens the iron and turns it into steel. So if that is the case, that doesn't really seem clean to me. And generally from what I've heard, over most wind turbines' lifespans, they hardly beat out the amount of carbon emissions that were used to make the wind turbine. So it's, yeah, you know, it's just not really a good thing to me. Because let's talk, if we talk about nuclear, sure, there are depleted uranium rods that eventually have to be taken care of, or spent nuclear fuel as it's called. But most radioactive waste, if you want to call it that, that's inside of those oil drums that they take off elsewhere, is usually just personal protective equipment and a whole bunch of stuff like that that has a very low radioactive content. Also, another thing to remember is that nuclear is not going to stay in the conventional form it's in decades from now. Right now, we use a process called fission. But in the future, it's very possible that we could have nuclear fusion, which is pretty much radioactive waste less. It produces almost no radiation from what we understand, but a infinite amount of power. So with that in mind, it would be a great energy source for the future. It completely overrides, and not only that, even with fission right now, it completely overrides the needs to have any kind of battery storage. It is able to adjust to the grid. It's an incredibly clean and an incredibly safe fuel source. And not only that, if we were wildly, I mean incredibly concerned about the amount of radioactive waste, for some reason, we could just simply load them up onto rockets and shoot them off into space with the amount of money savings we'd be making on nuclear power compared to all the other forms of power like gas, oil, and coal that we're currently using right now. That could be something that could be brought up as an alternative, because oddly enough, nuclear power is actually cheaper per megawatt hour than most other fuel sources, including coal and gas. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Walter A. Lakota is also bringing up solar panels use silica, which is a hazardous material that's considered rare earth. And that's true. A lot of the clean energy things, well, a lot of the clean energy sources aren't necessarily clean when you look at how they had to be manufactured. A lot of them end up being hardly better than the alternatives, especially for the return on investment that you'll get on that in the future. Nuclear power is truly, in my opinion, the only real clean energy source that can be seen out there right now, even in the form of fission.
It's got pretty bad waste off of it. I mean, it's clean when they're generating the energy. There's nothing being done that's harmful to the environment there. But at the same time, though, when they're finished with the fuel rods and when they're spent, they have to dispose of those somewhere, and they have to go to, I think they're called Superfund sites, where they're actually disposed of, and they're having to be buried in the ground and then covered with some type of shielding, I think. So that part gets dirty, but that's the only part of the process that I'm aware of that's actually not clean necessarily.
But it's not even really that dirty though, because most of that radioactive waste supposedly is just personal protective equipment that has some radioactivity on it. It's not even that high of radioactive, material or activity on it. But I mean, it's not that bad. And also on top of that, as long as you have some sort of a permanent storage facility that's well underground, it's not going to affect anyone. It's like I don't see people freaking out that there is uranium ore under somewhere emitting radioactivity. And so I don't know why people would freak out about that being in trace amounts on personal protective equipment and other things that, just happen to be underground as well and are exuding a low amount of radioactivity. Also, I believe the uranium rods, by the time they're spent, the radioactivity of them is wildly low. I believe that at that point it's depleted uranium, which is pretty much non-radioactive at that point. It's hardly radioactive, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not a nuclear scientist. I could be completely wrong with that. But still, I do believe in nuclear power a considerable deal.
I was looking here on looks like the HUD website, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It says proximity to Superfund sites, which is where they apparently dispose of this nuclear material. Let's see here. A Superfund site is an abandoned hazardous waste site, and it looks like, well, first of all, is this just for nuclear? First of all, because it could be any hazardous waste according to this. So apparently Superfund sites just mean hazardous waste of any sort. So that's irrelevant, actually. So I take that back. Forget what I said.
I don't believe we have a permanent nuclear waste facility here in the United States. I think the only one's in Finland, if I'm correct.
No, I know we're disposing of it here somehow. I'm trying to go back and quickly look for this. Let's see here. I can't find it right off the bat. I would have to go look deeper into it. But I have heard that there is some contamination risks from these Superfund sites after they dispose of that nuclear material.
Let's see here. How dangerous is nuclear waste? Let's see if we can just get a quick answer to that. Let's see. Hang on here. I'm trying to see. Dang, man. Why can't, let's see. Dang, it's not an easy answer. Because everyone's like, yes, it's hazardous, of course, but it's, not really, because if you just, put it underground, it's really not going to affect anyone. That seems to almost be the answer that everyone's giving. But it's a really in-depth answer,
Oh,
to be entirely honest.
here's the answer. It's right here. It says at the end of 1987, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act was amended to designate Yucca Mountain or Yucca Mountain, one or the other, located in the remote Nevada desert, as the sole U.S. national repository for spent fuel from nuclear power and military defense programs. So apparently, according to WorldNuclear.org, it's the Yucca Mountain in the USA.
I hate to tell you, man, it's not. Like, it got axed. It got axed right after that. Skip forward a couple of years, there was a whole NIMBY thing. They were like, don't put nuclear shit in my mountain. And then we didn't do it. So we still don't have a permanent storage site for that business at all. Yeah, I believe the only one's in Finland.
Okay, well, let me go back and look again because I see another government article here, and let's see if I'm correct this time. Let's see here. So it's saying low-level waste, let's see, we want to see spent nuclear fuel. So, let's see. I'm trying to quickly scan through this. They're very wordy in government documents. They don't make this easy to find. And I can't find it right off the bat. They've literally worded it like a fiend would word it. So I don't have the information for you, so I'm going to have to pass on that one.
Let's see here. Also, by the way, this is how dangerous radioactive material is. This is a picture of a dry storage of spent nuclear fuel. This is the fuel, by the way. This isn't the personal protective equipment or anything like that. This is just the fuel, and it's sitting in containers outside, and these guys are literally standing right next to it with no personal protective equipment on. And this is probably the late 80s or the early 90s when this picture was taken. So it can't be that dangerous, especially by the time that the uranium has largely, well, the radioactivity has largely been depleted from the rods, because you're able to walk right up to the containers and pretty much stand at them, and you're not turning into a Chernobyl monster, pretty much.
Well, remember, the risk with radiation is not short-term exposure, it's long-term exposure. So even if it's emitting a lower amount of radioactive, emissions from it, if you're living next to it or you're close by and you're there every single day, that exposure will add up and compile on itself, and that'll create an issue with health potentially.
Well, yeah, but you just put it off somewhere in the distance, in a mountain, most preferably, probably well underground, and then just close it off. And there you go. I mean, it's not that big of a concern at that point. If the uranium comes from the ground, and the uranium's under the ground right now, and no one's just dropping dead from radiation poisoning because of the uranium that's quite literally just within the earth naturally, why in the world would people be dropping dead from radiation when we put it back underground again in a permanent storage facility in some mountain way away from anyone? Why in the world would anyone be dropping dead then?
Oh, well, I mean, they shouldn't unless it's able to somehow get into the ground. I don't know how it would do that, but I don't know.
Well, it's not
I'm not an
molten,
expert on these things.
Like,
it's not molten. It's not. I'll take that back. Come on, forget that, man. Forget it.
Yeah, because the only time I can think of it there being a major radiation risk is when a reactor melts down and the core melts and it turns into a molten radioactive mass. I think that's the only time that there would be a serious radiation concern where the radiation seeps out elsewhere. Because if people are able to stand here at this thing, and of course it's probably not for weeks or years, where they're like, just go stand out there next to that thing. But if they're able to stand next to it with no PPE on and not get a lethal dose of radiation, and they're literally standing next to spent nuclear fuel inside these containers, I would say there's probably no problem with putting this thing in a mountain somewhere in the middle of nowhere and just leaving it there, because it's not like it's going to melt through the container. I mean, it's not burning these people alive here or anything like that. It's probably no big deal. It's just that, a lot of people don't know anything about nuclear power, so they always think that anything with the word nuclear in it, it's like some goopy, green, glowing sort of an object that'll melt you if you touch it. It's almost like, let me think. It's almost like some sort of magic almost with nuclear power. Like, people really don't get it, so everyone's always scared of it. But I would say that it shouldn't be that big of a concern. I mean, hell, the elephant's foot sitting at the bottom of Chernobyl, I mean, it literally stopped being radioactive years ago for the large part, from what they know.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I saw, let's see, Leo Jr. said in the live chat, they can put a nuclear reactor beside city, and my city is across the fence for someone else's yard. We actually know that because there is a very large, one of the largest nuclear power plants in the country in Alabama. It's the Browns Ferry, and it's right next to Decatur, Alabama. And it's also not too far away from Huntsville, Alabama, actually. And it's a very large nuclear power plant. It's still running. It's operated by the TVA. Interestingly enough, it's not operated by Alabama Power. But it's a very large one. It's literally right next to a very populated area. And it's been there for quite some time. I think it's been there for at least 30 or 40 years or longer.
Yeah, and it's not incredibly dangerous. Well, TVA doesn't really have that great of a track record, but it's not dangerous. I mean, this was actually shut down at a point by the U.S. government because of how unsafe it was for about 10 years for a little while, but it was brought back online, and there's been no issues since then. Most
I
people
mean,
don't
hell,
even.
they have a credit union literally 5 feet out away from the plant.
Yeah, I mean, look, they literally have the TVA Community Credit Union right here. I mean, how bad could it really be? It can't be that bad. It can't be bad at all. But still, I think nuclear power is the way forward because it's like, what are the alternatives? We burn oil and coal until the end of time, which we already know is damaging and harmful for public health and the environment. So it's like, do we keep doing that forever? And eventually we will run out of coal and oil. Who knows when? But we eventually will run out of it. Or do we set up wind and solar farms, and the wind farms and the solar farms just take up massive swaths of land that cannot really be used for agricultural purposes anymore. So we're just largely wasting the land at that point and really not getting any kind of return out of it, because that's made out of an exorbitant amount of steel, wind turbine is, and for photovoltaic cells, they're also made up of a whole bunch of other hazardous elements. Or do we go with nuclear power? A pretty significant investment up front, but it's very low cost in the long run, and it also produces an unlimited amount of power for the amount of area it takes up, and it's relatively, well, it's wildly clean, actually, compared really to any of the alternatives, whether it be solar, wind, or any of the fossil fuels. I would say that nuclear power is just, it's it. Like, that is it. Like, especially if you were able to create fusion. Because at that point, energy costs pennies. And you're able to really run anything on electricity at that point. And the only thing that's limiting you is the amount of voltage that is able to be carried across the high voltage wires. That's it. So
the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant's reopening. Did you know that?
really? I guess they're only opening up reactor 2 because I think the first one is still partially melted.
I think they're opening up the whole thing again, and they're selling all the energy to Microsoft for AI.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually they're reopening.
Huh. Let's see.
Free cheers.
There's 3 Mile Island back there. But let's see here. Health effects, 21st century status. Let's see here. 2020, the site was purchased by TMI-2, subsidiary of Energy Solutions, with the intent of cleaning up the site for less money than is available in a dedicated fund. They announced that 99% of the nuclear fuel has been cleaned up, and that the site has entered the next phase of cleanup that will last until 2029. They plan to finish the cleanup and demolish the plant by 2052. I know that doesn't sound like a plant that's reopening to me.
Let's see here. No, it's reopening. It says right here on September 20th, 2024, 3 Mile Island nuclear plant will reopen to power Microsoft data centers. So, no, it's reopening.
Huh. I don't see anything on the Wikipedia about that. Wikipedia, they're on the spot, man. Like, when the news comes out like that, they'll literally have someone listed as dead within minutes. So
They're
maybe
behind the times on this one right here. Let's see. It says that it's going to be reopened. Let's see here. Reopened in 2028. And the agreement spans 20 years to sell power to Microsoft from the 3 Mile Island. Let's see here. Let's see. It says here, it mentions the partial nuclear meltdown that happened a while back. It says the reactor that will be reopened to Microsoft data centers was not involved in the accident.
I done goofed. Miss Disa said I scrolled past it. I went literally right down. Let's see. TM1 was restarted in 1985, retired in 2019 due to operating losses. It is expected to go back into service by 2028 as part of a deal with Microsoft to power its data center. So you are correct.
Yeah, it's reopening by 2028. So but to answer your question though, that you had a moment ago, they're not reopening the reactor that had the partial meltdown. That one's going to stay shut down. They're just going to open up all the other ones.
Man, that one was cooking. that one almost cooked.
That was boiling. That one was boiling.
Man, they said, let's get some power, and then they cooked that thing, just like this.
And what type of reactor is this, a BWR?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's see here. They usually have that at the very top.
I sound like I really knew what I was talking about just then, too, when I said BWR. I sound like a real douche saying that. But
is it a boiling
I don't
water
know.
reactor?
The only reason I know that is because of the Browns Ferry one. I studied that one extensively when we thought about doing a video about it, but it got scrapped.
Let's see here. What kind of a reactor is this? It probably is a pressurized water reactor, a PWR. I think that's the most normal one in the world, but it could be a boiling water reactor.
Also, I just can't believe we're selling all the energy from this nuclear plant to just one
Microsoft,
company,
yeah.
Microsoft, to do AI. It's like, I guess they're expecting to make some good money off of AI one day because, that's a lot of money to buy all that electricity to open the whole plant.
Well, I'd be dipped, man. Where in the hell did they? Oh, let's just pull it up. 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island
They were saying it's a
reactors.
PWR.
It's a pressurized water reactor. That would be the most normal. Brown's Ferry is actually a little bit unique because boiling water reactors are somewhat rare and only have been used in, I believe, that power plant, one other that's run by TVA, and then the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. Pretty much of the same design. So let's see. Dang, man, do they just not like give that answer easily to the public about what these reactors were? Because either I'm not reading, which I might not be. Wait a minute, hang on. Hold up. It's a PWR. It's a pressurized water reactor, not a boiling water reactor like ours down here in Alabama. So that's neat. So it was kind of like a run-of-the-mill, any kind of a reactor sort of a situation. But with that, I hope we addressed that well. Matthew, how many more super chats do we have left?
Let's see. We have about 30 left.
All right, and so we are going to have to stop the rabbit holes and get down to business. And so with that, and that's really more of a no for me than you because I've been rabbit holing like a fiend. But with that, it is time for us to get on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Hokey Redneck once again, who puts in another $50 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey Redneck, for that very generous support. And he said, Andrew Dice Clay.
And I thank you so much for the support, Hokey Redneck. And I would dice clay, but unfortunately, I've got no clay near me, but I've got plenty of dice. Let's gamble. And of course, I'm just kidding. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and our next one goes to Cynthia R., who puts in a $44 donation, and thank you, Cynthia, as well, for that support. Hey, Cynthia said, thank you, Enforcers, and take one from the chat, and LSA.
And thank you so much for your support of the channel and helping it to keep on running, Cynthia R. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And that live chat question sponsored by Cynthia R is going to go to Foe, who says, who comes after Putin if he gets ousted? That's very important.
That is very important, and we would not know. A great example of that is in China, when Xi Jinping was rising to power, nobody even knew who he was. Like, he was just some random bureaucrat from Beijing, and he rose up all the way to the top. He literally thruffed to the top and was skimmed off in the foam and became the leader of China that we see today. The same thing could happen in Russia, because Putin was not a known guy before he became president. He was just some random nobody who was in East Germany for a little while in the KGB, and then he ended up becoming the president, well, really the dictator of Russia later on. So at this point, it could literally be anyone. It's most likely going to be a no-name nobody statistically. But with that, thank you once again for support in sponsoring that live chat, Cynthia R, because that is a good question, but we really wouldn't even know who it is because it's probably someone that nobody even knows at this point. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Templar's Squirrel, who puts in a 33. And thank you very much, Templar Squirrel, for that support as well. They said LSA and our global conflict and military correspondence leaders. Oh, thank you very much for that.
Hey.
They said it funny how fast we are moving towards Ender's Games.
Ender's Games? Well, I like to think it's Embers Games because I like embers. They're nice little fiery things. They're small and they float around. They're really cool. Very dangerous though. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for the kind words. We try our best to make sure that we keep this channel running well and make sure to cover the news fairly well. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, let's see. With that, really quickly, I'm going to check into something because someone just said, what the F? That's crap. And that was so rude. I'm going to make sure to check into this really quickly because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm not, there might be some kind of action taken about that. But let's see here. So let's see what kind of a position he was in. So, let's see here. Hang on, folks. Gonna make sure to read here. Let's see. So, gotta be honest with you here. Just went and looked, wanted to make sure. But I don't know what's up with the rudeness there because there's no way that, let's see. Hang on. There's no way that Jimmy Carter knew that he was a governor, and I want to make sure that I get that correct. Carter knew Xi when he was a governor, and Xi was assembly. There's really not a chance, because when Carter was around in politics, Xi Jinping was not even really in the government yet. He ended up in 1982 being appointed as a deputy party secretary in Hebei. That is largely such an insignificant position in the Chinese government at that time, and even now, that it would be pretty tough to know him, unless if Carter knew literally every single minor and senior bureaucrat within the entirety of the Chinese Communist Party, which even at that time was made up of tens of millions of people. So that would be highly unlikely, to be entirely honest. And that came off so rude, I had to go look into that to make sure that that was the case. Also, another thing is that the first position that Xi Jinping had was in April of 1979, in the last months of Jimmy Carter's presidency, and he was assigned to the General Office of the State Council and the General Office of the CPC Central Military Commission, where he served as a secretary to Ging Bao. So he was a secretary at that point in the latter days of Carter's presidency. So even at that point, he was still a no-name, no-face nobody who was just a paper-pushing secretary for an actual go-getter of the CCP. So that would largely be something that I'd have to say seems to be a bit of a stretch, and that was fairly rude. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to Cliff H, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, Cliff, for that $25 support. And we appreciate it. And Cliff said, great stream again. And Matt, please run a poll if Ukraine would be justified for proportionate strikes on the Ruski power grid. And yes, it's now justified, and he put in all the options here. He said this was a dumb poll. No, it wasn't a dumb poll. But I think I would tell you, though, that most people would agree that a proportionate strike would be appropriate. So I think that poll will be pretty straightforward. And it's not a dumb one, though. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you for the support. But I also largely agree. I think it would be a pretty interesting poll. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Trism666, who puts in a 25. And thank you very much, Trism, as well, for that support. And Trism said, I thought you mentioned NATO members can conduct their own actions and wars outside NATO, and couldn't FR and Brit be on their own selves, could provide peacekeepers in Ukraine, and merely cause a void of the defensive article potentially?
They could, but generally there's a lot more political strings at play, and I'm not talking about domestic ones, I'm talking about more about foreign policy and diplomacy sorts of things at play. That's why Poland has never gotten directly involved in Ukraine so far, as because the United States pulls them back, because Poland and the UK in particular, not really France, get a lot of their weaponry supplied by the United States, and if the United States isn't happy with something they're doing, they could stop further arms shipments and parts shipments to those countries that are pretty much keeping their militaries running. So that gives the United States a lot of diplomatic play to really be able to stop them from doing that. But technically within the NATO framework, yes, they could do something like that, and they would be completely on their own at that point, but they most likely wouldn't due to the realistic limitations that are outlined by how their militaries function. But still, thank you once again for support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Merlin77, who puts in a 22. And thank you very much, Merlin, as well, for that generous support. And he said, the quiet type.
Hey, and the quiet type, indeed. And I got to thank you so much for giving support and helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also had a super chat from guess who? It is Ballistics Computer, and they put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Ballistics Computer, for that support and helping to keep us running as well. And I do not see a comment attached. And that is correct, there is no comment attached, but that is their third ever super chat on a live stream, and huge shout to you for helping to get the channel running as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support is massive, and it helps us to keep this channel running. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Barnard, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, John, as well. He said, might there be any Russian-occupied land trades made in negotiations in exchange for Russia keeping Crimea, or do you believe everything will be frozen in a permanent ceasefire like the end of the North Korean War?
I have a feeling that one thing that is certain is that the Ukrainians will be giving up their holdings inside of Kursk. They really have no ambitions to hold that long term. The Ukrainians are not trying to make a land claim on Kursk. It would be illegitimate at that. It would not be recognizing international borders. So they will be giving up Kursk. I don't know about the rest, though, and I have a feeling that Russia will probably end up giving back some territory to Ukraine, and I'm assuming that the most likely ones to be returned would be Kherson and Zaporizhia. At least that's what I'm assuming right now. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have one from Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, and they put in a 20. Thank you very much, Mr. Uncle Sam, for that support and the Misguided Child. They said, if Russia gets cash poor, they're already there, my friend. Will they sell nuke tech or actual nukes to foreign agitators of the West? And thoughts, gents. And also, Slava Ukraine and long live the LSA. Blessed be our republic. Like and smash the like button and subscribe, folks. I would say yes, they will absolutely sell nuke tech to enemies. They've already done it with North Korea, or at least they have an agreement to do so. It's unclear if they've actually delivered the nuke tech to North Korea or not, but they are definitely doing that, or at least in theory they are. So they're already cash poor and they're already there. So your scenario came true. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say Matthew hit that dead on the nail. It actually is already true. They've pretty much sold nuclear technology to the North Koreans already. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Eason, yet again, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Eason, for the second support of the night. Are you good?
Dang, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Damn, I sound like a pain. But they said all foe the nuclear waste created in this country to date could be stored somewhere in this country in a space the size of a high school gym.
And I've heard that as well. It's not a lot of nuclear waste, and I don't think there's a hazard to the public at all in nuclear waste. I think that's just a common misconception because of things like The Simpsons that people watched growing up, and The Simpsons always showed the nuclear goo. Let me go see Simpsons nuclear waste. Let me just go show that to y'all really quickly because this is what a lot of people actually think nuclear waste is something like this. Where it's literally just a jar of the stuff and it's like green and glowing. That's what most people actually do think nuclear waste looks like. Or something like this. And that's just not the case. That's not at all what nuclear waste is. It's much more mundane, and it's honestly a lot less dangerous than what is perceived to be in pop culture, and for that reason, public discourse. But with that, I hope that does address it well. And some people are like, well, that's really stupid. I mean, obviously, no one takes The Simpsons seriously. Oh, no, you wouldn't believe it, but The Simpsons is one of, like, the main proponents, oddly enough, of being anti-nuclear, at least in modern public perception, from what has been looked into, is that people are always saying, yeah, you know, like the nuclear waste is like green, it's goo, they can drop it and it'll get all over the ground and then it's just radio. It's like, that's not at all what it is. Like, if anyone ever knows, most of it's solid waste. Like, there's hardly any radioactive liquid waste, unless if you're talking about the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, where they store a load of the radioactive water in these large tanks. That's one of the few times where you see a massive amount of liquid waste, but that's in a nuclear meltdown or a post-nuclear cleanup, and you don't really see that normally within a nuclear power plant's operations. I'm actually getting a book on it, so hopefully I'll be able to read up on it and actually know a lot more about how they operate and all that stuff, so that way I can tell you all a little bit more about it. But that book ought to be here in a couple of days. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Khan, LSA, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Khan, for that support and putting LSA in the name. He said, take one from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. And we will make sure to get one from the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And the one from the live chat, sponsored by Khan LSA, is going to go to Enhanson, who says, my number one question is who's pumping money into the Russian stock market?
Nobody. That's why they're going broke. Like, that's honestly how it's going right now. No one really wants to be in the Russian stock market. A lot of people are leaving it right now. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Junebug72, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Junebug72, for that support. They said, LSA, hello everyone. Love, compassion, and kindness for us all. Please take a live chat question, and thanks.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the kind words and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to keep on keeping on. And so with that, let's go get a live chat. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question goes to Tornadoes, who says, does the USA have any jets more powerful than the F-16? Thank you.
Oh, we
yes.
have plenty. I mean, like, we got a lot. The F-15, the F-22, and the F-35 are just three that I can name off the bat. The F-16 is our most numerous fighter. It's the backbone of the Air Force, but it is not the most competent and capable. That actually goes to the smaller numbers of aircraft that we have that are, actually, not smaller number. The F-35 is soon to be about as populous as the F-16, but the F-15s are much smaller in number, as well as the F-22s. But technically, those aircraft are better in the air superiority roles. The F-16 excels in the multi-role capability. The F-35 excels in both. Well, actually not both, but it really excels in the multi-role as well, making it a backbone aircraft on top of the F-16. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to GunFox61, the Medic Fox, once again, who puts in a 10 and says STS-32, 9th of January 1990, Shuttle Columbia launched out of LC-39A, landed at Edwards Long Duration Exposure Facility, retrieval IMAX camera. First of 6 shuttle missions in 1990.
And that's incredibly cool, and I got to thank you so much for the support and sharing that little tidbit of space history with us. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dolph, Gandalf, who puts in a 10 and says, ever seen that hilarious ancient video of Putin singing Blueberry Hill? Maybe worthy of an enforcer impersonation.
Oh no, I'm not. Oh no, I'm not doing that one. I've seen it. I'm not going to show it because of time constraints tonight. But it was hilarious. He actually did sing a song, Matthew, in front of a whole audience, and it was bad. It was not good. Like at all.
Oh yeah. Oh dear.
But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address it incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Glock Who's There, who puts in a 10 and says, Enforcer, I bet you could do a great impression of Carl from Sling Blade.
If I knew who that was, maybe. Like, maybe so. But unfortunately, I don't know who that person is at the moment. But I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from the Rubber Man 2036. And thank you very much, Rubber Man, for that support.
He's made of rubber.
Rubbers. He said, order some tacos, take a question, and great show tonight, and take another from the chat.
And honestly, I might have to take you up on that. I'm getting kind of hungry at this point, aren't you, Matthew? I'm kind of a little hungry.
I'm getting a little bit hungry. I'm a little bit hangry.
A little famished even. But I thank you so much for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it's folks like you who help us to eat. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
So let's get that live chat question
my
in honor of the super chat. And this one is going to go to Amy Lee Rodriguez, who says, do you think that Ukraine is going to make a push to recover Crimea or attack the Kerch Bridge?
I don't think it's possible at this point, to be entirely honest. President Zelenskyy has largely made that clear as well, that a strategic victory on the battlefield is not possible. All they can do is really sit back and watch the Russians run headlong into Ukrainian defenses and just continue to whittle them down. That seems to be the going kind of a gist at the moment. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. Thank you once again for support and sponsoring the live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we just got a super chat from Duncan VR, all the way from Australia. He puts in the animal noises all the way across the world. He sent a message and put in those animal noises. He put in a $14 donation as well, and thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. He said, Baba, Mudan. He asked meow, quack, Putin, oink, oink, for a loan of his pen. Meow, meow, meow. Tony wants to moo, moo, give a lift to the fly. Oh, Bob, man, oh, man, oh, man. I hope they don't crash out. Oh, man, that fly, Baba.
And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Duncan VR, because you always throw in the animal noises, ba-ba, moo-moo. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here, is going to go to Ethan, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Ethan, for that support. Also, people are asking questions. We have the country of Italy.
The entire nation of Italy.
It's just Italy with the full flag in here and everything. That was just animal noises being read from a super chat. Please take it easy there. I don't want the whole country of Italy coming after me over this mere incident. This is an international incident between Australia and Italy. Duncan's from Australia, and Italy just showed up in the chat. And Italy just left the chat, actually. But anyways, moving on from that, we're moving on to our next super chat, and this one goes to Ethan, who put in that 10 and said, for U.S. energy demand, you need to cover an area the size of the state of Georgia and solar panels.
Yes, that is true. That's a bit of an issue, because while land usage isn't really that big of a problem in the United States, there's plenty of land. In fact, we have more of it than we can ever use. Still, it seems very wasteful to use a massive space like that just for mediocre power production, and it doesn't even really match the demands of the grid. We're either going to be overproducing or underproducing every day. It's never going to be a perfect match, which just seems woefully inefficient. Well, it's not only, it doesn't seem woefully inefficient, it is woefully inefficient. And I think that there's a better alternative to that meets all of the boxes of, making sure to cut down land usage, cut down the usage of fossil fuels, but also be renewable and clean at the same time. I think there's a way for everyone to win, and that way is nuclear. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well, at least the best I can. And thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Marc-Andre Burnett, who puts in a 7, and thank you very much, Mark, for that support. And I do not see a comment attached to it, but of course, Mark is a longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Mark, for also helping to keep us running yet another night. And we also have a $5 super chat from Greg Francis, who says, chicken tendies will save democracy by uniting all the people over sauce debates, making Congress agree on at least one thing, tendies. And that would be vetoed, of course.
That would be vetoed because someone would say that it's not vegan or something, like it would be something like that. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that wasn't a jab at any political group, because to be entirely honest with y'all, if someone came forward with vegan chicken tendies, someone would shoot it down because they only eat steak and bull testicles every day of the week. You just never win. You're never going to make anyone happy. And that's something that we've learned here. And I know you're optimistic. You truly are. And I thank you for your optimism. But with our intro, I can make it 5 minutes long. And people come in and they complain that we're clickbaiting because they didn't get to see the news, because they came in like 15 minutes into the stream going live and they didn't see anything. And then if we make it 12 minutes long like it is right now, then we have people coming in and complaining that it's too long. So you just, I promise you, you never win. It's always a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a situation with most things. And so you largely just have to be happy with your own decisions and not really care about what anyone else thinks. That's why I don't get into the whole domestic political sphere, because that's all about caring what everyone else thinks, and I really could give a shit. I think what I think. Like, if I'm pro-nuclear, I'm pro-nuclear. I don't care if the Republicans or the Democrats are pro or anti-nuclear. I'm just going to do my own lane, and if they agree with me, that's great. If they don't, they don't. But I don't really live for those kinds of things. Not to make that like a philosophical thing, because that was honestly just funny. But still, thank you so much for the support.
Man, I can only imagine the debates on tendies in Congress. That would be horrific.
Dude, imagine
people standing up and saying, "Oh, we want big tendies, and that man's tendy is small." Oh God, don't say that.
Oh man, the congressional hearings on chicken tenders would be insane. Mr. Senator, do you sit there and eat chicken tendies on your fat ass watching TV? You're out of order. I'm not out of order. You shut your damn mouth. I'm getting my minute. Something like that.
And these days it's getting to the point where it's not just like verbal arguing. These days they're asking people to step outside and duke it out. These days it's getting down to that type of level. So it's getting even more deplorable.
You want a congressional ash beating laid out under Article 7 of the U.S. Constitution or something like that? It's like Mr. Senator, I'd rock your ass. And then they both go outside and they're like getting in a fight out there, something like that. Oh man. And then I can imagine the people who are going to be pro chicken tenders, they bring up another person, Matthew, in front of the congressional hearing. I heard that you're pro chicken tender, and that's absolutely wonderful. I heard that you were born under a double rainbow on a Tuesday of the Lord's Day. Is that correct? Yes, Miss Senator, that is correct. That is wonderful. I just love to hear it, because you're either glazing them or you're just blasting them. It's like there's no alternatives.
And then meanwhile, put the real, like, what's the best way to say this? Put the real feisty ones up against each other. Mr. Senator, I'll shove this chicken tendy down your mouth. Oh, you want to take this outside? Yeah, let's take these tendies outside and see what happens then.
Man. Honestly, dude, I just hate it because, like, have you ever watched older congressional hearings from, like, the 60s and the 70s and stuff?
Yeah, it's much more civilized.
Yeah, and they would actually ask real questions, like, so why do you think this is fiscally possible? Because it appears that the funding might not be sustainable for a long period of time with the return of investment that we're getting. And, like, the questions were really good and really well thought out, and they actually dealt with the governmental situation. Now up there, you'll hear, like, you remember that one person, Matthew, who sat there and said, "No, I did not say that person wasn't ignorant," and then they said the word. Like, you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's like, listen, it's like, I like my congressional hearings lame, mundane, and egg-headed. I don't really like them where it's like reality TV, because it's like, I don't really like knowing that the Congress is filled with people who don't have sense. That's just my honest take. But anyways, moving on from that, we're on to the next one.
Also, I'm seeing someone that knows too much in the live chat here. I'm not sure how they know all this, but somebody knows too much. And that person knows who they are. We'll have to keep an eye out. I'm just joking, by the way. I don't know how you know that, but well, I respect it. However you found it, I respect it. But anyways, moving on here to our next super chat. This one goes to Clayton Welke, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Clayton, for that support. They said, good day, Enforcer Matt and Enforcer, and good day to you, Clayton.
Good day.
He said, how come Ukraine hasn't been bombing Moscow like Russia's been doing to Kyiv? And have a great show tonight and today.
They have. They've actually hit multiple different areas around Moscow. They've hit Moscow City. They blew up a drone over the Kremlin. They've actually bombed Moscow a pretty good bit for their abilities. It's just that Ukraine doesn't have the same kind of destructive abilities that Russia has when attacking the capital city. But they have been attacking it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to George Tencher, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, George. He says, when it comes to Russia policy, now is the time to sweep the leg.
I get it. And I thank you for the support, and I'd largely agree. We have to sweep the leg. It's just about how. And I think Matthew and me, at the end of the day, largely agree and actually blended our plans together to sweep both their legs out from under them and really get them. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
As they say, I like to agree to agree. But moving on to our next one, this one goes to Clayton Welke. Wait a minute, hold on.
What?
Yeah, this one also goes to Clayton Welke, who puts in another 5. Thank
Oh.
you very much, Clayton. I thought it was a duplicate. He said, good day again. Oh, good day.
Oh, good day
He
to
said, if Russia collapses and they can't supply their soldiers, is it Ukraine's interest to keep fighting for their land back that they had lost in LSA?
At that point, yes, because they're not fighting against a legitimate government, so they may as well reclaim their legally accepted borders internationally, because there wouldn't really be opposition from the Russians at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again. And also, Italy's really got some opinions. I got to tell you, man, like, Italy's in here throwing stuff in, like, as a nation. Like, that's very interesting. But still, we're on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Spencer P., who puts in a 5 and says, Buenas noches, gents.
And buenas noches to you. And also, like that rat that you got in your profile picture there. Man, if you don't want to work here, you need to go to work at Chuck E. Cheese. Or they need another rat in a suit. But beyond that, thank you.
That's not even a rat.
Man, that's not even a rat. That's
a Five Nights at Freddy's thing.
No. That's actually a Chuck E. Cheese rat right there.
No, man, that's the Five Nights at Freddy's thing.
That's a Chuck E. Cheese rat. I know one when I see one. Let me go pull it up. Chuck E. Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese. Rat. Ah, yes. The hydraulic rat. Here it is.
Hydraulic rat.
These things are terrifying, honestly.
Oh my
But this
god.
one.
That is horrifying.
That is horrifying, honestly. They
If
rebranded.
your kids love that, you need to check your kid.
They rebranded, by the way, from this abomination.
Oh, that rat had seen some things in his time, and it landed at the children's place. Probably not the best place for him to land at.
Dude, this thing looks like it's going to come up to you in Hollywood and go, "You want to be movie famous?" or something like that. It's like, no. It's like, no. But also they rebranded the rat finally to this one, which is probably the most marketable one yet.
That rat looks like something that'd be on the side of a Danimals like carton or something like a yogurt carton.
Honestly, this rat, man, honestly looks like it's going to sell you a used car. Like, even still. Like, with this one being the most marketable one, looks like a used car salesman. But still.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I've never seen a used car sale. Oh, my God. Oh, great heavens.
Oh, great heavens. Oh, here's the new rat
That
suit.
kid looked scared, though. That kid didn't look like it liked that rat. No. He did not. Or she, excuse me, she did not like that rat.
That child has sense. That child has sense, probably grew up to be an accountant. What the hell is this?
Man, it's laying. I thought it was laying on cash for a minute. I was about to say that rat's been raking some dough in.
I got to be honest with you, man. Dude, it's that one guy from high school.
It's hot dog, man.
Aw, man. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. That is a rat. That is a rat, Matthew. That is the Chuck E. Cheese rat in Spencer P's profile picture. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping the show to keep on running. We are on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Simon Condon, who puts in a 5 and says, check out Thirlmere Steam Train Museum. I drive past it every day, and you can see the trains from the street view. LLT LSA in Slav Ukraine.
How do you spell that? I mean, we don't have time, but we have time for that. How do we spell that? Like, that's like, how do we
It's THIRLMERE Steam Train Museum.
Is this it?
That
Where
is it.
This is in Australia. A railway museum in Australia. Truly a feat. Let's take a look at this thing really quickly. It's gonna be really quick. Wow, that's nice. A 464. Interesting. They really got some nice stuff here. Not gonna lie. I don't know a lot about Australian railroading, mind you, so, like, I'm just kind of looking at it and like, let me try and think about this in an American way. But these are nice. They're well maintained, actually, well restored too. Really neat. And also, look, they even have a steam tractor, or a traction engine, as they called them. You could use those for really anything. Wow. Truly a blessing. And I got to thank you so much for the support and sharing this with us, because that's incredibly cool that y'all have a railroad museum just near Sydney. Like that. Look at that. It's just right outside of Sydney. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Laser314, who puts in a 5 and says, I like the short news videos.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying those short war videos, because we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, really just sweat and tears into them in the middle of the day, because sometimes we do like 30 takes and we just cannot get the intro right even. And by that point, I'm going, and then I just yell, F it, we'll do it live. And then I just do it in one take and then put it out. But anyways, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. We're on to the next one.
Some of my takes will literally be, good evening, folks. Good evening, folks. Good evening, folks. Literally one after the other after the other. And I'm sure people walking by at some point are like, what's going on in there? Who's he talking to? I'm talking to myself. Leave me alone. But anyways, going on to our next one here. This one goes to S. Pedro, who puts in a 5 and says, I used to work at a military power plant, and one recurring work was to replace parts due to rodents chewing the cables, electrocution, and clogging the air intakes.
Oh, those damn rats, those damn commie rats trying to tear down the American infrastructure. I tell you what, you should have gone in there with a rat trap and gotten them. but still, thank you for support and sharing that with us. This is actually pretty interesting, because we heard a fire was started at Browns Ferry because of some defective wiring, probably chewed through by, you guessed it, rats. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that the best we can. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Trism666, who puts in a 5 as well. And thank you very much, Trism. They said, did I miss what the Morse code was mentioning tonight? It seemed long, so I was curious, but I'm bad at the codes.
I think you did, because we had a pretty interesting Morse code. I saw that someone deciphered it earlier. I forgot who, because it's been about 3.5 hours now. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Tom Exman, who puts in a 10. Thank you very much, Tom, for that support. He said, look at a Pikes Peak cog railway.
Cog Railway. I've seen this one before. This is actually near Colorado Springs, near to Pikes Peak. Take a look at this one. It's an incline train. You know what it does? It goes up inclines. Pretty cool like that. Really neat, actually.
It's got cogs. It goes...
Man, it goes click, 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 click up the mountain, because it's using a cog. Really cool cog system. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that is addressing probably well, Tom Exman. And we are going to have to go hyper turbo mode, because we have to make sure to round out the stream at an appropriate time tonight, so that way we're not up till 1:30 trying to make sure to wrap up everything after stream. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Plazant, who puts in a 4. And thank you very much, Plazant, for that support and helping keep us running. And they said LLT LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel keep on running, because it's folks like you that help make this thing possible. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2 as well. Thank you very much, LSA Sergeant Figment, for that support, and thank you very much for helping keep us running. We appreciate it very much. And they said, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit that like button. That's an order. We gotten up to 3,225 likes at this point. Hopefully, we could get a little bit higher. Maybe a couple hundred higher than that. Maybe, possibly. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because what's up for folks like you, we want to be able to make this thing possible to keep it running. So with that, thank you so much once again. We're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jose Aguilera, who puts in a $2 donation. Thank you very much, Jose Aguilera, for that support. We appreciate it very much, and thank you very much for helping to keep us running. Thank you very much. The facts don't care about your feelings. Thank you very much. Our next one here goes to Nick Nelson, who puts in a $1 donation. Thank you very much, Nick Nelson, as well, for that support. We appreciate it very much. I don't see comments attached to either one of these, but thank you very much for the support and helping keep the lights on and enforce. What say you?
And I got to thank you so much for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. We have the entire People's Republic of China here in the chat. China just said what? And I get to say, bing chilling. And thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running all the way up until the day. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and with that, we're fresh out of Super Chat. Thank you all once again for the support, and we appreciate that very much. And thank you very much for helping to get the lights on this channel running, and also the coffee brewing in the background. We appreciate it very much, and thank you very much for doing that. And also, we are now moving on to our live chat questions. And of course, up first, we have our Morse code of the stream. Tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsons, Royal Fluffness, and Arabelle Garbo. So tonight's Morse reads: Russian is going to have an even worse time even dealing with the war with the upcoming sanctions. And LLT, LSA, and Slav Ukraine, Slav LC.
That's the sound of money. Y'all get that done on the nail. I gotta say, that's absolutely amazing to think that y'all been able to get that done on the nail for 1,058 days at this point. I gotta congratulate y'all gratefully for that, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to hear what that Morse code message says. Due to time constraints tonight and the fact that the stream is now 2.5 hours long, we're gonna be getting 3 live chat questions and then rounding out the stream. I'm terribly sorry about that, but once again, I hope y'all all do understand. This stream's been going on incredibly long. We've been running marathon streams for days in a row. We want a break. Please, let us sleep. And so with that, we're on to the last question of the night.
All right, and moving on to the third, the last question of the night. This one goes to the Fire Guy, who says, "How long will Russia stand by before they release the Hounds on Ukraine and NATO and with the current state of affairs?"
Oh, it probably won't be that long because they're either going to eat the dogs here soon because they're that poor, or they're going to let them loose. Who knows? Probably a couple of months, but I have a feeling the Russian Federation is going to collapse before that. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we're on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and the second to last question of the night goes to Eric Horner, LSA, who says, if Putin was to lose total control and he gets the boot, how hard would it be to turn the country around from being a communist to a free republic, or would he have to, or would the politics stay the same?
The Russian Federation would probably never turn to a free republic due to the cultural precedent that exists inside the Russian Federation because of the Mongol influence during the 12th to 14th centuries. There mostly would not be a way to be able to turn the Russian Federation into a democratic society like many other countries within Eastern Europe and Western Europe. For these reasons, I do believe that the Russian Federation will always remain an autocratic authoritarian dictatorship, much like we're seeing right now, and that will mostly will not change well on into the future. It'll probably take hundreds of years for the cultural shift to actually occur. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the final question of the night. So who's the lucky last person to win the lucky last question of the night?
All right, we have a very thought-provoking question. The last one of the night, very disturbing question. I think it's one that we might be all asking ourselves, but we need to hear from Michael Herrera. Michael Herrera, thank you very much for the good question. And the last question of the night, he said, "How far do you think that we can push Russia economically before it desperately resorts to nuclear or WMD weaponry?"
That's an interesting question. Matthew and me are actually on the fence about that because Matthew believes that they'll never get to that point, really, or if they do, the Russian Federation's government will most likely not listen to the orders of Putin. I'm believing that eventually we may be able to push them to that point. I think if the Russian economy is inevitably going to collapse and there's a large amount of hunger strikes, or not really hunger strikes, but food riots inside the Russian Federation and a complete collapse of public infrastructure because of a lack of fuel products, we'll most likely see that that is the point that the Russian Federation starts to take incredibly serious and drastic actions to be able to try and turn around the situation. And that's what I'm largely believing at this point, but I do thank you so much once again for asking a very interesting question, because that would be about the best answer I could give at this point. And also Spencer P threw in a 5 and said, she sells seashells by the seashore. I hope I was able to say that as quickly as I could. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support, Spencer P, and helping the channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and make this thing a reality. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. Of course, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run a stream for 10.2 thousand people here at the peak and about 70,000 people who has watched before the stream ended. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're always here every single day, 24 hours a day. We're not talking this fast usually throughout most of the stream. We're talking fairly normally. It's just that this thing's going on very long like many other streams. We want to make sure to round this thing out at a reasonable time. But I still thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. But before we go, we still have another super chat from Trism666 who threw in a 25 and said, "Thank you for all your hard work and good night." And thank you so much for appreciating this channel massively, Trism666, and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. And thank you so much for enjoying our hard work. We try very hard, and you have a good night. And I hope that everyone else has a great night as well. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.
All right, and thank you all, folks, again for tuning into the stream. Once again, tonight we had a lot of news to cover, and of course, it was a lot of news, and it was a lot of analysis, and a lot of polls, and we love the polls. Yes, we do. We love the polls. We love them very much. But we also got 3,300 likes, and also 70,000 people joining us for the end. 70,000 people. That really gets me going fast. But thank you very much for everybody for joining us tonight on the stream. And of course, I'm trying to keep up the speed, but it's very hard to keep it up. But thank you all once again for watching, and Slava Ukraine. Here with Slava. Someone put in the clown face. You gotta go, buddy. Bye-bye. Get, there we go. So, bye-bye. But anyways, with that, folks, we'll see you all tomorrow. Be sure to join us tomorrow for the Midday War News stream, if there's enough news covered, also tomorrow as well at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly War News stream. But with that, be sure to enjoy your snow coffee, and of course, good night.
army